Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me. I missed you guys. I took the week off last week. Well, I took the week off from filming. I did not take the week off from like researching and putting cases together and stuff like that. But it was my birthday, and then my best friends were coming from Vancouver, and so I decided to soak up a lot of time with them because it's very minimal that we get. So thank you guys for your patience while I didn't post, but I did miss you. So I'm not going to make you guys wait long today. We have so much to go through today, so let's just go through it. Today, as you can see, we are talking about Laci Peterson. This is a case that I've always wanted to talk about. It's just one of those cases that never really leaves you, and I think a lot of us feel the same. Netflix just came out with a 3-part documentary. I watched it over on Patreon, had a lot of, I don't want to say fun because it's emotional, but I'm liking doing reactionary stuff on Patreon and just hanging out with you guys over there. So I would say that this documentary was one of the best ones that I've seen in years. Skye Borgman directed it, which is phenomenal and very obvious when you watch it that she was behind that. But what I really thought was so touching was just to see footage of Laci with home videos and stuff like that, and then hearing directly from her friends and family who were very present in the documentary. It was really touching, and I think that it's those moments that just help to remind us that these are real people, these are real tragedies, and what happens to those people who survive, who are left without their loved one, this has everlasting effects. So it was really, I felt like it was, a privilege to be let into those beautiful moments and not just solely focus on the tragedy. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend. It was so well done. I also learned a lot of things that I just didn't remember. So it caused me to go in and kind of dissect further things, which brought me to Reddit. And oh my gosh, I came across this poster on there, Quirky Motor. If you need a job, email me. Oh my gosh. So well done. There's other cases that this poster on Reddit puts, and I'm saying this poster because I don't know if it's male or female. Whoever you are, phenomenal work. And if you need a job, please reach out. So yeah, that with the documentary, we got so much to talk about. All right. So overview of the case. Scott Peterson was sentenced to death for the murder of his wife, Laci Peterson, and unborn son, Connor, in 2004. He was sentenced. They went missing in Christmas Eve, December 2003. Well, Laci went missing and she was carrying her baby. Then in 2020, it was announced that Scott may get a new trial and that the LA Innocence Project were taking on his case. So I think it kind of reinvigorated things. We're seeing a lot from Scott's family as well, being, steadfast in his innocence, his sister-in-law even going to law school to help with the case. I have thoughts, okay? I have thoughts. Over on Patreon, I feel like as we're watching together, we have thoughts. I know you have thoughts, so let's go through it. And I think that the complexity of this case, I'm going to try to keep as focused as I can. You guys, there's just so much to go through. So if you feel like, I think I've done an okay time with like the keeping it all afloat, but apologies in advance. There's just like so much. But I think, in my opinion, one of the complexities of this case that does allow for some of his family, not all of his family, support him. I believe one of his sisters, I want to say Amanda, I don't know, I'll correct it. She wants him to just come out and admit to what he's done and give everybody peace in this situation. So it's not everybody, but he does have supporters and he does have family that support him. And I think what allows them to hold on hope, because I've never been in this situation. You don't want to think the worst about somebody that you love, right? And what is giving them a bit of hope, I think, is that there's no like smoking gun, if you will. Basically, all of the evidence here is circumstantial. That being said, when there are so many pieces of circumstantial evidence that just accumulates, as it has in this case, it does become quite strong. But if you're going in blind to this, or if you have questions, let's just go through everything, okay? So in 2002, this case, it gripped the nation, the world, if you will. I think a number of us just remember seeing the picture of Laci's beautiful smile sitting in a chair at a Christmas party. She's in her red outfit and she's holding her pregnant belly. That photo would become like even more infamous as the case unfolds. Laci was 27 years old, living in Modesto, California with her husband, Scott Peterson. She was 8 months pregnant with their first child, who was a boy that they planned to name Connor, when she disappeared on Christmas Eve in 2002. And we know, the spouse is always the first to be looked at. And if their story checks, the case moves on from there, like to the closer knit members of the family and friends circle. And Scott painted a very idyllic life with Laci, who was born Laci Rocha in Escalon, California in 1975. She was the second child to Dennis and Sharon Rocha, who were dairy farmers. And as a child, she and her older brother, Brent, who was 4 years older, would help on the dairy farm. When Laci was only 2, Dennis and Sharon divorced, and then Sharon met her longtime boyfriend, Ron Gransky, who became like a stepfather to Laci. And her father, Dennis, also remarried, had a younger daughter, Laci, and Brent's younger sister, Amy. And so when their parents divorced, they would still go and visit their dad and help out on the dairy farm. And Laci is described as a talkative, vivacious person. She enjoyed cheerleading. She enjoyed gardening with her mother. And most of all, I think you see everybody who knew Laci personally say that she just always like had this big, bright smile. Her smile is absolutely unforgettable. You can just see as an outsider the joy and love through the videos and pictures that she brings to a group. I think one of the most heartbreaking aspects of this case is when you look at it as a whole, and her goals was that one of her main goals was that she wanted to be a mother and a housewife more than anything. In 1994, while she was at Cal Poly State University, she met a waiter at Pacific Cafe in Morro Bay who was also a student named Scott Peterson, and he absolutely swept her off her feet. Looking back at the patterns described from those who knew them, Scott would, it wasn't a term I don't think that was used then, but it was like almost like love bombing is probably how we would describe it now. I'm glad that we are recognizing a little bit of those patterns of the love bombing. And that's not to say that if somebody that you meet and is courting you or whatever, whining and dining you and stuff like that, that they're all red flags. But it's just like when you see certain patterns, and then almost, we'll get into this later, it's almost like it's like a compensation for things. But nonetheless, for Laci, she saw it as very impressive. She told her family and friends about him early on, being like, I think this is the guy that I want to marry. And he's so accomplished and he's so young for already accomplishing so many things. And Sharon had mentioned in the documentary, there was a moment where she's hearing about him and she says to Ron, I hope he's not lying to her. I hope like he's not embellishing all of this stuff. But when they met him, he did seem to be as impressive as he was portraying to Laci. Scott was born to Lee and Jackie Peterson in San Diego, California in 1972. By the time Scott was born, his family was pretty well off. His father owned a crate packaging company, and then his mother, Jackie, had a boutique in La Jolla? The boutique was called the put on. He was the youngest of 7 children. I didn't realize how many kids were in the family, but 7 children, 4 of who he grew up with. And he was definitely doted on because he was the baby of the family. And you can very much get that vibe when you hear his family talk about him. He's the baby. He can do no wrong. I'm not mistaken if I believe it was his father who would refer to him as Mr. Wonderful. And he was also the only child between Lee and Jackie. So the other siblings were with their past relationships or marriages. And so those were his half siblings. And then Scott comes in. He's the baby and everybody's just doting on him. He attended a private school. He played golf, even attended Arizona State University to play golf on a partial scholarship. I guess he began playing golf around 13, 14, and pretty soon he was able to beat his dad at the game. So he had dreams of becoming a professional golfer. I believe he was teammates with Phil Mickelson. But according to a father of another younger golfer, Scott was taken off the golf team because he had taken this young guy out. He was underage. He took him out drinking while he was visiting Arizona State on a recruiting trip. And then when his dad found out, he had gone to the golf coach and Scott got kicked off the team. He carried on with his studies, though. Initially, he was planning to major in international business, but ended up graduating with a degree in agricultural business. And professors who taught Scott said that he was a model student. I think it was his agricultural professor said, I wouldn't have minded having a full class of Scott Peterson's, which I'm not surprised about at all. The guy's a charmer. So while working in college, he works as a waiter, met Laci, who's also a fellow student, in 1994. And I guess she would occasionally visit the restaurant and visit a friend that worked there. And then when she saw Scott, she gave him her phone number and he called, and the rest is history. She told her family that this is the man that she's going to marry, and they did. They got married at Sycamore Mineral Springs Resort, and together they had businesses together. They owned a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo before they decided to move back to Modesto, where Laci was from. Now, during the time of their relationships, behind the scenes, Scott was having multiple affairs. Apparently, one of them Laci did know about, but decided to, work through it and focus on their future. So in 2000, the Petersons bought a home with the intention of starting a family in a nice neighborhood on Covina Avenue near East Liloma Park. Laci went to school as a substitute teacher, and Scott began working selling fertilizer for a European company called Tradecore USA. It was about 6 years into the relationship, they made the decision to start a family, and getting pregnant was not that easy. It was just being like, okay, we're going to start a family now, and it just didn't happen, which is often, can happen very often. I don't think it was talked about as much, in the 90s, early 2000s from there. Now with social media, I think more people are coming forward and allowing others who are having difficulties conceiving, feel less alone. But they were going through it for a couple years. It was about 2 years of unsuccessful attempts before they got pregnant and found out that it was a little boy who was due on February 10th, 2003, who they named Connor. 6 weeks before her due date, the Petersons are getting ready for Christmas celebrations when Laci goes missing on December 24th. I want to go through a little bit of the day before her disappearance and then go into Christmas Eve, just from accounts of people who knew them based on what they saw. the day prior. So around 8:30, their housekeeper, a woman named Margarita Nava, came to the house. She said that when she arrived, Scott was already at his warehouse getting his work done. So she just did her regular cleaning routine, dusting, cleaning bathrooms, bedrooms, hallway, dining room, living room, and kitchen. She mopped, which we'll get into in a little bit. But she put the mop outside, she said, to dry out. And while Margarita was there, there was a point where Laci had gone grocery shopping and then returned with her purchase from Trader Joe's and then left around 1 p.m. or around 2:30 p.m. for a facial appointment that she had. After her facial appointment, she had just a routine prenatal exam with her OBGYN. Her doctor said that Connor's heartbeat was strong at approximately 150 beats per minute, and he was a viable baby, so that if he was born that day, they wouldn't stop the delivery. He would be born and viable. Probably need to have a little bit of a visit in the NICU, but they were like, he's doing good. Her doctor and the nurse said that Laci's attitude was pleasant. She smiled a lot. There weren't any obvious concerns or that she or Scott were having any problems in the pregnancy. After that, at around 5:45, Laci went with Scott to her sister's salon for him to get a haircut. And while they were there, Amy mentioned that she had ordered a gift basket earlier on in the day for their grandfather and mentioned that she was going to need to try to arrange picking it up the next day. And Scott offered to pick it up, saying that he was already going to be out and he had plans to golf that next day, Christmas Eve. While at the salon, Scott asked Laci to order pizza, so she used the salon phone, ordered pizza, and Scott and Laci asked Amy if she wanted to join that night, and she said no, she had a friend coming from out of town. At home, around 8:30, Laci called her mother, Sherrilyn. Sherrilyn was actually on the other line at the time, so the conversation was only about a minute or so, she said, but she talked to Laci. They confirmed that they were going to be going over to Sherrilyn and Ron's house for Christmas Eve dinner, and that was pretty much it. There was no real talk about either Laci or Scott's plans the next day. The following day, now we're on December 24th, Scott said he left the home around 9:30 in the morning, and that when he left, Martha Stewart was on and Laci was watching it. Laci said that she planned to walk their golden retriever named Mackenzie. She was going to do some more grocery shopping, bake some gingerbread, and then asked him to fill up the mop bucket so she could mop before they were due at her parents' home for Christmas Eve dinner. Scott said he left home then. He went to his shop to get some work done, and then instead of golfing like he told everybody, like his original plan was, he decided to go fishing because it was too cold for golf. So I guess it was around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, which is for us Celsius people, it's around 4 degrees Celsius. He went fishing at Berkeley Marina between Oakland and El Cerrito, California, 90 miles away from their home. He fished for about an hour, and then on his way back, he calls Laci, but she doesn't answer, so he leaves a voicemail.
Hey, beautiful. I just left a message at home. 2:15. I live in Berkeley. I won't be able to get to Villa Farms to get that basket for Papa. I was hoping you would get this message and go on out there. I'll see you in a bit, sweetie. Love you. Bye.
Scott arrives home at 5:45 p.m. He sees that Laci's vehicle was in the driveway and Mackenzie, their dog, was in the backyard, but his leash was still on him. And when he went inside, there's no sign of Laci. Scott said he didn't think too much of it. He did some cleaning. He washed the clothes that he was wearing fishing because he said that they had gotten wet, grabbed a slice of pizza, took a shower, and then emptied the mop bucket that had water in it outside of the house. So it's not until after his shower that he calls his mother-in-law Sharon at 5:17 p.m. and asks if Laci went there early because he couldn't find her. Sharon tells him no and asked if he spoke to any of her friends or the neighbors. So Scott said he hadn't, and he would call around. So at 5:32, Scott calls back and said no one had seen her. Sharon instantly knows this is not right. She goes to the fact that Mackenzie had a leash on, thinking, okay, like Laci took him for a walk, and then he made his way back home. So she goes to the park where Laci usually walked the dog, couldn't find her, and by 5:45, Laci's stepfather, Ron Gransky, calls 911 to report Laci missing. We'll hear that call, trigger warning. It's a 911 call. I usually give a trigger warning, and I'm so sorry. There have been some episodes that I've forgotten to do that in, but I know there on the most recent one there was a comment about how it is triggering, and I feel you. Even if it's like just any 911 call is triggering, even though there's not like a lot of panic in this one, but this was the call from Ron.
How can I help you? Yes, my son-in-law called. He went playing golf this morning at 9:30. My daughter's been missing since this morning. She's 8 months pregnant. She took her dog for a walk in the park. The dog came home with just a leash on. So the dog came back without your daughter? Right. Okay, what is your address, sister? Well, I'm at... Is that where she's... So, it's over at Maloma Park is where she went for the walk. What is your name? My name is Ron, and we're calling the death pet. Okay, what is your name? Gransky. Gransky? R-A-N-T-S-K-I. Her husband, Scott Peterson. His dog went over the park and tried to... What's your stepdaughter's name? Scott Peterson. No, your stepdaughter. Laci Peterson. Laci, P-T-E-R-S-O-N, right? P-T-E-R-S-O-N. And she's white, black, Hispanic, Asian? She's Portuguese or white. How old is she? She's 26. What time did she leave the house and didn't come back? That we don't know. We just had a call from her son-in-law. Said he left this morning at 9:30 to play golf. He got home about a half hour ago. He's nowhere around. Okay, so she went to walk the dog with? Walked it in that park at the Maloma Park. What's that park over there with the falls? Yeah. And she's 8 months pregnant, you said? Pardon? You said she's 8 months pregnant? Yes, ma'am. She's got short black hair. She's about 5'1". About 2'1"? Yeah. Dark eyes. Dark hair and eyes? Yeah. The dog came home without the leash, right? The dog came home on the leash without her. Okay, you're gonna... So, her husband's looking for her right now. Are you gonna stay here at the... I'll stay here. If I have to stay here, we're gonna send a master over there as soon as they're available. Okay, you're at right now. Okay, good. Her husband's name was? Scott. Peterson? Do you know what he's wearing? No, he just told me from the house. I have no idea. He's walking, he's going over there looking for his wedding. Okay. Okay, well, I'll come out as soon as they're available. Okay. Okay? Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye.
At this point, there were kind of like two different teams that were responding. So there were officers that went to search the park where they believe Laci had walked the dog, and then other officers that went to the Peterson home to walk through the scene and talk to Scott about like what his interpretation of that morning and afternoon was. I just want to just mention something that we'll talk more about, but immediately this case was taken on like seriously as a missing persons case with all hands on deck. There is discussions of, you know, a rush to judgment argument, but it was, we'll get through it. You'll see that there were like simultaneous investigations going, and it wasn't just like there was no officers or patrol teams or anything like that also treating this as a missing persons report. Yeah, missing person case. So as investigators are getting information, this is where they're getting questions answered, but then there's additional questions from those answers that just aren't really adding up. Starting with Scott telling officers that Laci was going to be walking the dog when he last saw her, but according to her OBGYN, her yoga teacher, her neighbors and friends, Laci had not been walking due to her advanced pregnancy and issues that she was having, that she had talked to her OBGYN about, like being lightheaded, dizzy, not feeling well, especially if she had gone on walks and exerted herself. According to two of her neighbors who lived across the street from her, they had not seen Laci walking their dog for weeks. Investigators spoke to the neighbor, Karen Service, who is the one that found their dog and put him in the backyard. And she said that she came back home from running errands, saw the dog, and put him back around 10:30 a.m. According to Scott's phone records, he checked his voicemail at 10:08 a.m., but then didn't use his phone from 10:08 to 2:15 p.m. when he made the Hey Beautiful check-in call. Something to also know is while there's conversations going about what the plan was, Scott's telling people different things. He's telling some of the neighbors that he had gone golfing, and then he's telling investigators and Laci's parents that he had gone fishing for the day. According to him, he also made this last-minute decision to go fishing after he had already left the house, was doing some work, and then decided it's actually a little bit too cold for golf, so I'm going to go fishing, but doesn't call Laci to check in. I don't know the dynamics of their relationships, but just kind of how it was presented that they're very close in the relationship. You've got the Hey Beautiful text where he's keeping her posted that he's leaving the marina, yet there wasn't any conversation about being like, it's too cold, I'm actually going to go fishing. And, we'll get into the suspicions about why that was. After Scott placed that Hey Beautiful call at 2:15, I believe he placed one more phone call around 3 p.m. to Laci, but this was before arriving home. He didn't leave a voicemail then, and he never called Laci's cell phone after coming home and seeing that she's not there. I never had, even when it was established, like the police are coming and stuff like that. She's missing. There's no more calls. So he's returned to an empty house, cars in the driveway, dogs in the backyard with a leash on, and instead of calling Laci, he dumps a bucket of water, places the mop and bucket outside, takes off all his clothing, puts it in the washer, eats a snack, has a shower, and then calls Laci's mom to see if she's there, and then neighbors and friends. One of the first things that the patrol officer who initially arrives at the scene thinks is a little bit odd was that the two mops and an empty bucket, but it's damp still, so it was recently used, that's outside, and then seeing that the floor had recently been mopped and that the sidewalk was wet from where Scott said that he had just come home and emptied the bucket. And again, I don't want to speculate because I don't know what their day in, day out routine is and if she just mops the floor every day, but I automatically went to the fact that the cleaner was there the day prior. And I just thought it was odd because it had just been cleaned. You have so much to do. She had a lot of plans, a lot of things and baking and all of that on her plate prior to going to dinner at her mom's for Christmas Eve. It's whenever the cleaner is there, you think you're oh, okay, I have tomorrow at least off. There's no mopping for me today. That being said, though, I do understand that they had a golden retriever, so you got to stay on top of the fur. But that was for the investigator. It wasn't even about knowing about the cleaner, just that this has recently been dumped. There were other priorities going on in the house than emptying out this mop bucket. He also notices that in the bathroom, Laci's curling iron was on the counter, kind of looked like it had been used. And her sister had said the night before, Laci was excited she was going to go home and try doing this little hair flipping technique that her sister had taught her that she thought would look really cute on her. There was also a open bottle of ranch dressing on the kitchen counter, as well as a pizza box from the pizza that they had the night before. And according to their friends and family, Laci's the one who liked ranch on her pizza, not Scott. This first officer also found a bunched up rug by the back door, which he described as looking like something quite heavy had been dragged over it. And as soon as he notices it and makes a statement about it, Scott kind of straightened it out. There is a photo of it after being a little bit straightened out, but you can still see that there was, the rug wasn't straight and there was some bunching on the one end still. Just looking at the scene in general of going through okay, what could have happened if somebody broke in here? There wasn't any signs of a break-in. None of Laci's jewelry was missing. She had her purse, her keys. They were there and untouched. And so the officer asked Scott, what did you do that morning, this morning, afternoon? And Scott said, I went fishing, and immediately gives him his parking receipt. I guess one of the other responding officers loved fishing and overhears this, and he's like, oh, what did you go fishing for? And Scott just doesn't have an answer, like just literally doesn't say anything. And then he was like, what bait did you use? And Scott's like, it was some like silver lure. And he asked like where he kept his fishing stuff. Scott said he kept it at his storage facility with all of his work stuff. And that was kind of it. And then that officer said that not long after, Scott comes up to him and he says, sturgeon. Like, so that's what he was fishing for. Now, Scott's family has a website that is dedicated to proving his innocence. And the fishing thing is obviously going to come huge into play. You know this if you already know the case, but if you don't, this is going to come back a lot. So they're trying to like minimize the whole fishing thing and try to distance Scott from this, saying that they're not shocked about him fishing because he used to do it a lot. He fished even with Laci's family. People knew that he liked to fish. And this is something that is argued about. And I think it's irrelevant whether he fished before, whether her family and him fished together in the past. What the issue is here is the lack of knowledge of the fact that he had a boat that was recently purchased that nobody knew about. And he told people that he was golfing. And then after she was missing, he still tried to stick to that story depending on who he was talking about. It's like he didn't really want to get too much into it, but then when he was talking to officers, wanted to be transparent about the fact that he was fishing. By this point, as they're just talking to the first responding officers, the sergeant arrives on scene. And so those patrol officers go outside, give them a little bit of a debrief, and address the fact that they're having like a little bit of concerns. Again, this isn't just like pointing the finger witch hunt. You start close at home and then you kind of move from there. And they're having questions, one of them being that he didn't have an answer for what he was fishing for or what bait he used. The fact that he just goes out and gives a receipt to show like, this is my alibi, I was fishing. Then the fact that they asked like, did you call Laci? Has she answered? Hasn't called her. He also wasn't the one to report her missing. It was her stepfather who had. He also cleaned himself up, washed his clothes before calling Sharon to check on Laci to see if she was there. And then there's also something that's suspicious, but also up for debate. On the kitchen counter, on top of the fact that there was the pizza box and the ranch dressing, there's a phone book that was open up to an ad. And the ad was for a criminal defense attorney. I guess this page was specifically, it feels like forever that there was like phone books, but in phone books you had certain pages that were like more cardstocky. Just, you're going to pay more for those, have the intention of people when they open it, or when it's just kind of like left, it can open up to that page quite effortlessly and you can see it easier. And that, I guess, was one of those pages. So definitely could be a coincidence. And then there was also the bunched up rug near the back door that he's like straightening out. At this point, after hearing everything, the sergeant agrees that, or I guess makes a decision. I don't think any of the officers were like pushing this, but hears everything and thinks, okay, just to be safe, like let's get homicide detectives here from the get-go, and then we'll just, work our way out. This is another thing that Scott's supporters say prove that the Modesto PD rushed to judgment and only focused on Scott from the get-go. And their explanation is, no, we're just really following the evidence and the questions that we're having. And when we're getting answers, we're not really getting answers. We're actually getting more questions. Also keep in mind, while homicide detectives, yes, were involved, there were also other officers that are continuing the search of Loma Park. They are canvassing the neighborhood. There was K-9 unit out to search the park and surrounding areas. There was a full search team that was assembled very quickly. So once the homicide detective, Al Brocchini, arrives on scene, he is also briefed and then notices some other strange things in the house. One of them being that Scott had claimed to be fishing for sturgeon, but didn't use any bait, actually. The one bait that he did have, it was actually not even for sturgeon. Not to mention that sturgeon was not in season, I guess, at this time. But his bait pack had been in the tackle box still sealed. He also noticed an impression on the bed that was about 5 feet long, and he thought when he looked at it that it looked like the shape of a wrapped up body. And so he took a photo of it. And once he spoke to neighbors, he learned that that morning he was seen loading 3 4-foot tall patio umbrellas. They were individually wrapped in tarps and putting them into his truck between 9:20 and 9:40 a.m. Scott's explanation for this when he was asked was that he was bringing them to the warehouse, but then forgot and never dropped them off. Scott tells Detective Bikini he leaves the house. I believe he tried to say around 9:30, and then phone records were able to show that it was closer to 10 that he left. And their neighbor Karen, who found Mackenzie when they spoke to her, she found Mackenzie wandering the streets around 10:18 a.m. So this leaves a very small window. If when Scott left, Laci was alive, very small window for her to disappear from that time frame, because Karen said that there was like nothing unusual at the house or anything like that, and Mackenzie had already had the leash on and was just wandering. Initially, the detectives wanted to go see the warehouse pretty early on into talking to Scott, and Scott says that they could search it, but it would be hard because there was no electricity. So they get a search warrant and just determine that that was a lie. The warehouse had electricity, including overhead like fluorescent lights, and no power outage had been reported. So they did ultimately conduct a search of the warehouse, and once again, more questions. They find concrete debris. They initially found it in the back the bed of his truck, but then they also find it in this boat, this fishing boat that is in his warehouse stored. So let's talk about the boat first, all right? Scott bought this boat with cash, $1,400 on December 9th. He did not register the boat. He did not tell his friends or family about the boat. Nobody knew about the boat. The only person who knew about the boat was a man named Bruce Peterson, who's not related to the Petersons, but this was the man that he bought the boat off of from, like an ad that he came across. And this boat was unused from when he purchased it on the 9th until that day, the 24th, Christmas Eve, when you decide just last minute to go and get her out in the water, when you got errands to run, your wife is heavily pregnant, she's got things to do, you guys have plans. Anyways, this is, some men are that daft. Like, they just don't know. Anyways, so remember, Scott says the decision to go fishing was last minute. Everybody believed that he was going golfing, and so he made the decision that morning because of the weather. But it was 4 days prior, December 20th, that he pre-bought a 2-day fishing license for December 23rd and 24th. And then going back to the concerns about him not knowing what he was fishing for that day. Now, I didn't know this was a thing. I'm sure like if you're a fisher, you know that this is a thing. I actually had to ask my dad about it because he loves fishing. The man loves fishing. If you can't get a hold of him, he's fishing. So I said, Dad, like before you go, do you scope out which area you're going to go to? Do you figure out what they've got in the water? Or you just like go and like whatever's on your line, you just like pull it? He's like, no. There's a lot that goes into it. You plan ahead. You know where you're going, what's in there, what kind of lures you're going to need to attract that fish. And then there's also stipulations about how many you can catch, like with your license and what's in season. Sometimes it's illegal to fish for certain fish during different seasons. So then once I learned that, I understood more about like why everybody was also concerned that he didn't know what he was doing out there, like what he was fishing for, especially since his family are the ones that said, like, we're not surprised about the fact that Scott was fishing because like he liked fishing and he did it a lot and he even fished with Laci's family and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that's not the point. Okay. And if he knew, he should have had those answers. Like if he had actually prepared, he should have had those answers like right away. It's the secrets. So that was a concern talking to Scott, what he was fishing for, because he said sturgeon. I guess it was out of seagull season and illegal to fish for in December. And then even if he didn't know that, he didn't have the lures that he bought for fishing. They were still unopened in the truck. He also went fishing 90 miles away from his home, even though he's got plans that evening. It's Christmas Eve, errands to run, not even for Laci, but for his sister-in-law, saying, I'm going to go pick up the basket for Grandpa. And he passed 9 other places that he could have fished instead of the Berkeley Marina where he went that were much closer. So he goes 90 miles, passes all of these other places, even though he's saying like he was just itching to get into the water. Well, if you were itching to get in the first one you see. Get it in. So you drive 90 miles so that you can only fish for an hour, and then you have to head back home. So that was just the round trip was 3.5 hours from that marina to come back home. Now, all of this is playing out just between investigators. Okay, so at this time, for the public, this is very much still being treated as a missing persons case. The community, like I said, and patrol teams had gotten together looking for Laci with her family. Her family, like on the Rocha side, they are speaking to media, pleading for Connor and Laci to be returned to them safely. And even when there's, grumblings of, oh, do you think the husband did it? They're supporting him. They're like, no, absolutely not. Let's just stay focused on getting Laci back. And they stood beside him. Then they're even more on Scott's side when on December 26th, so like Boxing Day, they get a lead that they think in the case when Laci and Scott's neighbors across the street from them, the Medina family, return home from Christmas break, and they find that while they have been gone, their house had been burglarized. So the Medinas left their home at 10:32 on December 24th and did not return back until the 26th in the afternoon. So a robbery happened some time between then. And the burglars had stolen a safe, some money, and like some other valuables in the house. So assuming that the burglary happened on the 24th and not the 24th or 26th, like the robbers are later going to claim, it's believed that the burglary happened at about 11:40 after the Medinas left for Christmas holiday. This was the initial belief. This time also was corroborated by another neighbor named Diane Jackson, who saw what she described as 3 dark-skinned but not African-American men behind a van in front of the Medina's home around this time. So police put out a reward. Why am I like this? They put a reward for information and got a break within days. Turns out Stephen Todd and Donald Pierce were arrested for the robbery on January 2nd, 2003, after they tried to sell some of the valuables that they took from the Medina's home. So they're arrested, and their first words are, I didn't have anything to do with that pregnant girl. Which, yeah, is also doesn't look good. And the defense has always argued that the police should have looked into that way more, especially like based on the statement. Like the first thing that you're going to say is I didn't have anything to do with the pregnant girl, but they did look into things. So both men had pleaded guilty to robbery. They were adamant that it happened on Christmas Day or earlier on the 26th before the Medinas got home, not on the 24th. And the Modesto PD to this day are adamant that they cleared these men. They believe that the robbery happened later after Laci was already missing. But Scott's family feel that the burglary happened on the 24th and that they lied about the dates just so that they could, continue to distance themselves from Laci disappearing. We're going to get more into that in a little bit, but for now, for the investigators, they're back at square one, back trying to eliminate Scott because they haven't done that yet. And as that's happening, we know this, like in media and just like even online speculation. There wasn't really much online speculation at that time in groups and forums and all that stuff as it is today to speculate, but suspicion is swirling around Scott. People felt like he was just too calm, not even like calm, like just like kind of like blasé. Like he was just, he didn't want to do interviews, didn't want to be on camera. And soon people were like, is there somebody else? Yeah, there was. Sure enough, there was. A woman came forward saying that her and Scott were having an affair, and her name was Amber Fry. It was December 29th, 2002. Amber Fry calls the Modesto PD and reports that she's in a romantic relationship with Scott Peterson. And the way that the Netflix documentary explained how this all went down, and I didn't know this, was as that call was coming through to the department, there's an operator on the call, and one of the detectives is beside her and watching, like, as she's typing, hearing the words, and it's like, woman on phone says she's in a relationship with Scott Peterson since November, and he interrupts and's like, is she on the call right now? Like, can I talk to her? And so he takes over the call, and they interview Amber on December 30th, 2002, and they learned that Amber first met Scott in November. Did I say November, that they interviewed her on November 30th? December 30th, if I messed that up. Sorry. They learned that Scott and Amber met in November 2002, and it was through a friend of hers named Sean. So Sean met Scott at a work conference early in December, or in November. Come on, Sherrilyn. Don't be spreading false info. November. And one of the days after the conferences, there was like a group of conferencees that were having a drink in the hotel bar and were watching a baseball game that was on TV. And while goofing off at the bar, Scott, who no one knows is married, asks Sean what he should put on his name tag, and he says to her to help attract women to him. So she thinks for a moment, and then she said, you should put I'm rich. And he says, no, I'm going to go with HB, which is short for horny bastard. So from what I understand, the vibe was quite flirty, even though Sean stated several times that she was engaged. Scott never says anything about him being married. And during this conversation, while she's talking about her fiance, she's saying her and her fiance, like, she believes that they're soulmates. And Scott says he had a soulmate once but lost her. He explains to her, like, portraying himself very much as a promiscuous bachelor guy. He says that, he's really having trouble finding the right one. He's trying to please girls all the time. One time, a girl that he was interested in was a vegetarian, so he became a vegetarian to make her happy. And Sean says, well, that's really stupid. You shouldn't have to, like, change yourself for a girl. Like, you'll find the right one. And he's like, oh yeah, well, the sex was great. He's also, and if you're single, this is, whatever. And people want to listen to you, say what you want to say. He's also telling her, though, very much implying that he's single, that he's had a lot of one-night stands, a lot of them, but all of them were bimbos with no brains, and he's just looking for somebody single, intelligent, that he can have a serious relationship with. So as the night goes on, he's asking her, like, do you know any single friends that would, like, check my boxes? And she says, like, I do. I have a single friend, but she's been through a lot of bad relationships, and so I'm not even going to bother introducing you to her if you're not serious. She's describing Amber, and he's like, well, is she, is she good looking? Is she intelligent? And Sean says, yep, she's pretty. Some people think she's too skinny. And then she said, Scott's like, that's okay. I like thin women. So I guess a couple of guys that were around while this conversation was going on was saying that it was flirty when they're hearing, like, what he's saying to Sean. Sean's saying several times, she's engaged with her soulmate. They just don't want any part of it. So they excuse themselves and go to the washroom, and then they just never come back. So because this was a networking conversation, I guess it's irrelevant, but just, whatever, we'll toss it in there about that night. They kind of, Sean and Scott end up hanging out and chatting till like 3 o'clock in the morning. And then because this is a networking conference, they keep like a friendly relationship, but also like a business relationship. So they would email each other back and forth about work stuff. I guess she was in a business that tested like farm products, so that he would just call about things that he, bouncing, networking, whatever. After a little bit of exchanges, he reaches out to Sean again, saying that, I'm, hey, don't forget, I'm looking for a serious relationship. And so at this time, her thinking like, okay, he's reached out again to ask if I know anybody. I'll give him Amber's number. So she gave Scott Amber's number, gave Amber Scott's number. At the time, Amber was a 26-year-old single mother with a toddler who worked as a massage therapist near Fresno, California, which was about an hour from Modesto. And they went on a blind date in mid-November. And Amber describes him as very charming, like everybody does. He was a perfect gentleman, bought her flowers, got this private dining room booked out for them to have dinner for their first date. Now, some of Scott's supporters will say that their relationship was not too serious and it was just like blown out of proportion for, the salaciousness of the whole story. Like, that he was cheating. And, they said they've only gone on 4 or 6 dates, which is kind of true, but not totally. They only saw each other 6 times, like each visit, but they were multi-day visits. Now, I read a lot of their phone transcripts after she had come forward to police, and they were recorded. And in my opinion, it was not very casual. Like, there was a lot of future-based conversation. It's not just like 2 minutes of like, oh, hey, what did you do today? What's your favorite color? Like, no, they knew a lot about, he's asking about like close people in her life. She's asking about who she thinks are like the only close people in his life, planning for the future, talking a lot about her daughter and stuff like that. And it checks out because he's love bombing, right? So she was not under the impression, and he was definitely not giving the impression that he was not wanting something serious. Whether those were his intentions or not, he was not giving that message at all. The fact of the matter is the entire thing was a lie. She had no idea about him having a wife or a baby on the way. And he didn't just lie about being married. He lied about other things like his job. He made it seem like he was like on this international level of like businessman who often traveled the world. And that was, I think, kind of to give him time to not have her suspicious or Laci suspicious when he's coming to visit her, but also not like at her beck and call. Now, prior to Laci going missing, there was a situation where there were rumors that Scott was married, and Sean, Amber's friend who hooks them up, hears this in early December. So she hears Scott's married, calls Scott because she's livid. She's like, I've told you already, like, this is my friend. I trusted you. She's been through a lot. You knew this. You said you were looking for something serious. Like, what the hell? You're married. And Scott calms her down and says that he had been married in the past. And she's like, that's not good enough. Like, you told me you hadn't been. And this isn't sitting right with me, and says, you need to tell Amber. You have until the end of the week, and if you don't, I'm going to tell her. So this conversation was on December 8th, the same day that Scott began looking for title activity on his computer. And on the 9th, he arranged to go to Amber's house and talk to her. And he says he's got something serious to discuss with her. And when he arrives, he's bawling. Amber cannot calm him down. And after a while, he's finally able to, get something out, and says that he hadn't been entirely truthful with her. He tells Amber he lost his wife and that this was going to be the first holiday season without her. And he says that the only reason why he didn't say anything was because the whole situation was just like too much, too upsetting for him. And so she's like, oh my gosh, like this poor guy. She feels bad, like that he's so emotional and bawling, and thinks that she's going to be mad at him. And she's like, that's okay. And she just wants to clarify. She says, are you married currently? And he says, no, not currently. And she left it at that, respectfully so. She didn't press him for any details. And she says that she just didn't want to hurt him further. It was very obvious, like the way that he was reacting. And she's saying like he's sobbing, like hysterically crying. And she's trying to calm him down just to get out what he needs to get out. So then when he gets it out, it's obviously a traumatic experience if that was the way that he's acting. And so she's just like, well, I'm not going to push that further. And so she's made it clear, like it was never stated by him that she died or anything or left him. It was just that he lost his wife, and that was it. So it's left to interpretation. They move on from everything, almost kind of like, things just kind of kept going steadfast, stronger. And on December 14th, Laci and Scott had a Christmas party for friends that they were supposed to go to. And so did Amber. So Scott tells Laci he can't go to the Christmas party because his boss had unexpectedly flown in from Europe and he needed to, go and tend to him. But in reality, he went to Amber's friend's Christmas party. I didn't mean to say that's not Amber's fault. Amber doesn't know what's going on right now. But he's with Amber. And those pictures, those are what later become like, notorious photos. Laci's at a Christmas party alone that evening. Her friends said, she was really tired the last stretch of her pregnancy. That's the photo of her sitting on the chair with just this beautiful smile, holding her little pregnant belly and in that beautiful red outfit. And it's also the photos that you see of Scott and Amber that night. Like he's all cozied up to her. She's just got this big smile, like thinks she's hit the jackpot of a guy introducing her to her coworkers. This was at her boss's formal Christmas party, and they were photographed together. After this, Amber and Scott, they weren't talking as much, and Scott said that's because he had a lot of traveling going on. He had already said like he wasn't going to be able to celebrate Christmas or New Year's with her because he was going to be in Europe. He was going to be in Mexico. Like he had a lot of travel stuff, some work, some pleasure, and he wasn't going to be around. So detectives find out how all of this came about and how she figured all of this was on December 29th, so the same day that she calls. A friend calls her to say, hey, have you heard about this missing woman? I'm reading the paper, and the description that they're giving of the husband is Scott Peterson. Sounds like you're Scott, and his wife is missing in Modesto. So she does a little bit of research on her own and figures out, yeah, it is Scott, and immediately calls the detectives and tells them about her relationship. So when she met with detectives, Scott knows nothing about this. She agrees to record their phone conversations. I guess Detective Bracchini just goes straight to Radio Shack right then and there when she said, okay, like rigs her up, shows her how to start recording, and she did. And these freaking phone calls, like shocking is like least, like they're diabolical on his part, okay, not hers. So let's paint a picture, all right? She's just found out the 29th, gets rigged up on the 30th, December 30th. December 31st, New Year's Eve. While there is a candlelight vigil for his missing wife, Scott answers a call from Amber. They're on the phone for 70 minutes. And during this conversation, Scott's telling Amber that he's at the Eiffel Tower. Yeah, Paris, okay? Celebrating New Year's Eve with two of his buddies. He had names for, I believe, Pascal and Francois. And he's laughing and like so joyful. And he's telling Amber like all of the cool things that he's been doing in Paris. He's like, you should see the crowd. Oh my God, you should see the lights. It's amazing. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Meanwhile, he's surrounded by mourners that are scared to death about his wife missing.
Hello?
Amber!
Hi.
Amber!
I can hear you.
Amber!
I can hear you.
Amber, if you can hear me, it's New Year's.
I know. I can hear you.
Amber, it's New Year's here. Are you there?
Yes. Having a good time?
Amber. Hey, Happy New Year's.
Happy New Year.
I wanted to call you.
Thank you.
Amber, are you there?
I'm here.
Amber,
I wish you could hear me.
I'm on the, I think that you're there. I'm near the Eiffel Tower. New Year's celebration is unreal. The crowd is huge.
The crowd's huge?
Amber,
Yes, I'm here.
Amber, if you're there, I can't hear you right now, but I'll call you on your New Year's.
Okay, I'll hear from you then.
Amber, miss you. I'll see you soon.
Okay. I hope you...
In another conversation, Scott tells Amber that they're talking about kids, right? Like, and this woman's not trained. She's got the questions, really good at just like trying to keep things like as normal as possible to not, set him off or get him suspicious. So they're talking about kids, right? Because remember, Laci's pregnant, missing, and it'll come up later about like Scott wanting kids and stuff like that. And in this conversation, he says he doesn't want kids. He actually wants to get a vasectomy because that's how adamant he is about not having children. And that if Amber was wanting to have more children, it would be a deal breaker. And so she's like, well, I already have a child. Like, she's not going anywhere. And he says, yeah, like the only kid he could ever think about having would be her daughter. He's like, we get along great. He was buying her gifts, picking her up from daycare on some of his visits. And so he's saying like, no, like that would be good enough for me, but that's it. His pregnant wife, like she's missing, like it's having a baby, couple weeks, and is talking about having a vasectomy and being like, this will be a deal breaker for us. He keeps this charade going until January 4th of not saying anything to Scott or to Amber about Laci. And then finally he comes clean about the fact that he's the man with a missing wife. And this wasn't just because like he decided to do the right thing. Amber, by this point, because she had been carrying on these conversations, sick because he's just straight up lying and she's having to pretend that nothing's wrong. She kind of like drops a little bit of a suspicion without like leading him to like know. So she nonchalantly says that she's received this message from a good friend of hers saying like, we need to talk. I have something really important to tell you. Like, it can't be over the phone. This has to be done in person. And says to Scott, like, I'm nervous. Like, I don't know what it is. So he tries to like redirect the call and it ends not that long after. And then the next day he's like, so I think I know what the conversation was about, and says like, have you been watching the news? The pregnant lady that's missing, like that's my wife and she's missing. Amber does a great job again. She already knows this, but being like, what the F? What do you mean? Like, you have a wife, you're looking for her. Like, you told me that, at first you lied to me about being married to begin with. Then we find out that you were married. Then you say you were married, but you lost your wife. And now your wife is missing. Like, what am I supposed to believe here? And he doesn't give her anything. He just is like, I cannot talk to you about that right now. I can't tell you anything about that right now. He made a lot of odd statements, even not fully answering whether the baby was his. It was always like when she's asking like, is it your baby? Like, were you guys having problems? I can't talk about that right now. We can't talk about that right now. Like, that should be, anyways. And then he tells her, I never cheated on you. She's like, what do you mean you never cheated on me, Scott? You've been married. Like, I'm the other woman. Like, what are you talking about? So in the end of everything, the conversations are, diabolical. Let's use that one. But she doesn't end up getting like a confession or anything useful for the investigation, but like leads of where to look for Laci. But it definitely shows Scott's character.
The worst thing in the world.
Okay.
And I'm so sorry that this has happened, and I'm so sorry I'm going to hurt you in this way.
I don't want to do this over the phone. I want to tell you this. I want to be there in person and tell you this. But I'm sure that's why Saki called you.
What?
I'm sure it's why Saki called you.
Why would Saki? What are you talking about?
It's the worst thing. Sorry, Amber. I'll just tell you.
Okay.
You haven't been watching the news, obviously.
No.
I have not been traveling during the last couple of weeks. I've lied to you when I've been traveling.
Okay.
The girl I'm married to, her name is Laci.
Mhm.
She disappeared just before Christmas.
Mhm.
For the past 2 weeks, I've been in Modesto with her family and mine, searching for her.
Okay.
She just disappeared, and no one knows
Okay. Now,
where she's been.
Scott.
And I can't tell you more because I need you to be protected from the media and Ayana. Okay, they are amazing.
Scott.
Yeah.
Are you listening?
I am.
You came to me earlier in December and told me that you had lost your wife. What was that about?
She's alive.
What?
She's alive.
Where? She's alive? Where?
In Modesto. Now, I know this is the hardest. I wanted to tell you first. You need to protect yourself from the media.
Okay.
Okay, if you've been watching the news at all, or you haven't, the media has been telling everyone that I had something to do with her disappearance. So the past 2 weeks I've been hunted by the media. And I don't want you to be involved in this to protect yourself. I know that I've destroyed, and I hope so much that this doesn't hurt you.
How could it not affect me?
It does. Yeah,
How can you possibly think that this would not affect me?
Remember, I know it does. But I know I've just been torn up the last 2 weeks wanting to tell you, and I'm so weak that I haven't, and I just hope that I had to call you and tell you that.
You never answered my question, Scott.
Sweetie, you don't, I can't say anymore.
I think I deserve.
You deserve so much better. There's no question you deserve so much better.
Yeah, and I deserve to understand an explanation of why you told me you had lost your wife and this was the first holidays you'd spend without her. That was December 9th. You told me this, and now all of a sudden your wife's missing? Are you kidding me? Did you hear me?
I did. I don't know what to say.
I think an explanation would be a start.
I know you absolutely deserve an explanation.
Yes, I do. I do.
And I want to give you one.
I'm listening.
I can't now. I mean, you don't understand.
I don't.
You don't understand the situation.
Then why don't you fill me in on the situation and make me understand?
I can't now. I'm so sorry for that.
Why?
It's to protect all of us.
To protect all of who?
Everyone involved.
So where is she?
That's what we are trying to find out. It's a nationwide search. It's a $500,000 reward for information leading to her safe return.
Okay, so again, you never answered my question. Why did you tell me it would be the first holidays without her?
I can't. Sweetie, I can't explain any more now. I'm so sorry. You should be so angry at me, and I hope you are. I just...
Yeah, isn't that what you told me before? Oh, I wish, it'd be so much easier if you just hate me and not want to talk to me. And of course, the person I am, of course I'm going to say, you told me you lost your wife. You sat there in front of me and cried and broke down. I sat there and held your hand, Scott, and comforted you. And you were lying to me. Again, you're lying to me about lying.
I lied to you about traveling, yeah.
That's among everything else. That's just an added.
Yeah.
So again, are you going... Is it that you're just not going to answer me?
I want to.
And what's stopping
I do.
you? And what's stopping you from answering?
Tell me things.
Why would you tell me this on March 9th, that you have lost your wife? And I'm sorry I can't tell you until after I get back to Europe, and about this tragedy. And I asked you, are you ready for me? Oh, absolutely. This will be the first holidays without my wife. I'm going to spend them with my family in Maine. Is this not what you said?
It is.
It
and
is. And how do
it
you
is.
explain all of a sudden you tell me it's a national search?
It is. Yes.
How is that just not such a coincidence?
If you think I had something to do with her disappearance, it does so wrong.
Really?
Yes, it is.
So how is there such a coincidence to that story from what you're telling me right now about what...
Well, no, sweetie,
And you still have the audacity to call me sweetie right now. First, let's see, first, Dave, my friend Dave lies to me about his wife.
I know
He lied to you and tell you about this.
I know
And then you have the audacity to say, how do you handle something like this? Are you kidding me? And to put me in a position, and you want to protect me from the media? Why did you involve me in this? What
I
role did I play? How long were you looking for me, Scott?
I'm sorry?
How long were you looking for me?
Looking for you.
Yeah.
I
Like,
don't understand it.
for me? Isn't that what you told Sean? You were looking for me or someone like me? How is
I want to.
what? I am just such at a loss right now.
I know.
You say you can't tell me. You want to tell me in person. At what point are you going to tell me in person, Scott?
Once we find her.
What was that?
Once we find her.
Once we find her, what?
And that will be, resolution, and I will be able to explain everything to you.
When you find her.
I know you can't trust me. I know you can't trust me. I could never ask you to do that.
Okay, so.
I could never ask you, but I had.
But didn't you say never? I will do anything for you to trust me, baby. I feel we have a future together. What was that about?
I never said anything to you that I didn't mean.
You never told me anything you didn't mean.
I lied to you about things I did.
Mm-hmm. So, how am I going to stay out of this? And how do you see that happening? How do you see that I'm going to stay out of this, or I'm not going to be dragged in or involved into this? How is that, Scott? Can you answer me?
I don't know, but you don't deserve to be.
No, I don't deserve to be. You're right.
Exactly.
I don't.
Exactly. You do not deserve to be.
So why
You
did you
don't deserve to do the things that I've done to you. But there's no but. I'm sorry. Hey, I agree with that. I want to explain everything to you.
Yes.
But I can't.
Why?
There are a lot of reasons. Primarily protection for everyone.
Protection of who?
Everyone.
Who's everyone?
Everyone is you, me, our family.
Everyone that would possibly look at you a little bit differently, because who the hell am I? You're telling me that we're, I asked, is there anybody else? Oh, no, I'm monogamous as far as I'm
I
concerned.
never cheated on you. I never did.
You're married. How do you figure you never cheated on me? Explain that one to me.
I want to explain it to you, Amber.
And? You will.
I can't.
You're going to, right? Is that?
I will. No, I will.
When?
I hope to hell that you will listen to me when I can. I want to explain to you so badly, but I can't now. And I hope, and I can never ask you to trust me or to even listen to me again.
I possibly can.
I know it. I can never ask you to do that to me. And I just hope that sometime in the future you will let me tell you the whole story. And I cannot ask you to do that.
That makes a lot more sense to me now, Scott. Of course you couldn't tell me the story about your wife because it hadn't happened yet. And you were hoping to resolve in January that it would be resolved and you'd have a story to tell me.
Do you think I had something to do with her disappearance? How do you believe that?
Well, let's see. How can I believe that? How can I believe that? How could I believe anything for...
I am not evil like that.
I would hope not.
Oh my God.
You've lied to me now. And, actually, I was thinking, you know how many people I've given your picture to? Or of us in Christmas cards? So you're telling me that you want to keep me out of this and Ayana, and you want to protect me from that. How? I'm just so at a loss.
Amber, I had to tell you. I've been wanting to tell you. I hope in the future I can tell you everything if you'll let me. I can never ask you to trust me. And I'm so sorry that this has happened and this is happening to you. And that is just the truth.
When I met...
It hurts.
It hurts.
It hurts me to believe that I could have something to do with her disappearance.
Well,
But I understand your anger.
You know what, actually, I have not said that. Those words have not came out of my mouth, Scott. Now, have they?
No, but everyone has been pointing a finger at me.
It came out of your mouth. And I'm not one to judge. There's only one.
I know you aren't. Yeah, that's very true.
But isn't that ironic how, Scott, when I first met you on our date, how you told me you were going to Maine with your family, and you were going to Paris and Europe and all these things. And then you came to me after Sean had found out that you were married, and you came and told me this elaborate lie about her missing and this tragedy, and that that this will be the first holidays without her?
I never said. Amber.
Yes.
God, I don't want to fight with you. You know that I never said tragedy or missing.
Oh, yes, you said you've lost your wife.
No. Yes.
Obviously without me saying much. But we will...
I said that I lost my wife.
Yes, you did.
I did, and yes.
How did you lose her then, before she was lost? Explain that.
There are different kinds of loss, Amber.
Then explain your loss.
I can't to you now.
When can you?
I can
when
once
my name
there's...
has been smeared all over tabloids and everything else because I'm the lover, I'm the girlfriend. When you've been married to this woman?
You don't deserve that.
No, I don't deserve this. And you say you've been faithful to me? Oh, some people I tell I've been married to, and other people I say I never have because it's so painful for me.
I've lied to you.
Oh, more than many times, apparently. When you set me down, remember I said, I thought you were going to tell me you were married.
Right.
So, Scott, what about your baby? Lacey's missing woman pregnant? Is that what you just said?
Yes.
Really? So is that why...
And
Yes.
I want to explain all this to you now.
Yes, I'm listening.
And I just am not able to.
Why?
I can't ask you to trust me. But you will, if you give me a chance later to explain it.
Later when?
You will thank me for... What's that?
I will thank you for what?
You will thank me for not explaining it now.
Really?
Not thank me, but you'll understand. And I can't ask you to ever listen to me. I can't do that.
Well,
And this is the hardest thing. You can't even believe that. I understand.
Yeah, is that why you said you didn't want to have any children and Ayana was the only child you ever seen having, and at that point, assuming we're together, you'd have her as your own? Why would you tell me that when you were expecting a baby?
See, I'm so sorry that I can't tell you everything now.
Why can't you tell me everything? Why?
There is simply, it just has entirely too many repercussions, and they're not all for me.
And
Okay, there are a lot, and all the repercussions don't deal with me.
what repercussions?
If I was to explain everything to you,
Yes.
and you know, the media started attacking you, or anything else, so many people would be hurt.
You think?
I know it, and I'm so sorry that you're being hurt by this. But, I mean, I can understand you can never believe what I'm saying. But, God, I hope you do, but I can understand you. So sorry.
Tell me the coincidence of Laci, your wife, disappearing, and your stories earlier in December. And then you're carrying on this elaborate lie with me that you're in Europe and you're in Maine with your folks? Explain that to me.
I wanted to tell you about this
Really?
as soon as it happened.
But of course you couldn't because you're in Maine with your folks.
I didn't make that trip.
So, you know, you and I,
I destroyed.
you and I, assuming we'd be together, how would you explain a new baby that you brought into this world?
I'm sorry.
How would you explain your baby to me?
You don't know everything.
No, I don't. So what is it?
I want to tell you everything, but I can't.
Okay, are you listening to me?
I am.
Okay, how now is, you know, again, you saying assuming we stay together and you talk about all these future things with me, how would you explain a newborn child of yours that, I mean, I would assume she'd want you to have regular visits with this child, right?
Sweetie, I'm so sorry, but I can't
Why can't
tell you about those things right now.
Why? Why not right now?
It would hurt entirely too many people.
Now, is this child yours?
Sweetie, I'm sorry, I keep saying that. You asked me not to. Amber, I cannot tell you.
Is this child yours?
I can't tell you all these things now.
Why?
The only things I needed you to know, and I hope that you're not. You know, God, I know I hurt you.
You hope what?
Amber,
Yes.
Amber.
You hope what?
I just hope that, I mean, you don't get hurt more by this than I'm doing.
You already know what I've gone through. And for you to have no compassion for me.
I hope you don't think that's true.
You know, actions speak louder than words.
That's true.
That's meant for you to ponder on for a while.
It's true. I deserve anything you say. There's no question, Amber.
So tell me, Scott,
Yeah.
why should I not go to the police with this?
It's your decision.
Really?
Of course.
And at that point, I go to the police with this. What do you see happening?
I imagine that,
Go ahead. What?
well, I mean, they would, you know, I don't know. I don't know if they would release it to the media or, you know, I mean, obviously they would question you. They want to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, it is your decision, of course. I wanted to tell you what has happened, and I wanted to tell you that I like you.
And what stopped you from this?
Previous to now,
Yeah.
you know, I could make excuses how to justify it
You
to
know,
myself
you're just
about.
great right now.
Well, I know I'm telling you that I justify to myself by saying, no, you know, she just found out about Dave. No, she's had a fight with her sister. Don't tell her. No. It was probably just weakness and hoping that I could hold on to you.
Just a weakness in holding on to me?
And longing to hold on to you.
Longing to hold on?
A weakness and not being able to tell you about me traveling. Amber?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah, I'm here.
I deserve everything that you want to say to me.
Well, again. You know, Sean,
I'm sorry? Amber?
are you forgetting things you had discussed with Sean? If you're not serious about a relationship, don't call Amber. She's been through too much already. Do you not remember having this discussion with Sean?
Yeah, I do remember that.
Oh, but you still went ahead and went through. Why? Why? Are you there? Hello?
Amber?
Yes?
Amber?
Did you hear me? Are you driving? Hello? Hello? Are you driving? Hello? If you could hear me, call back.
Once the detectives got enough conversations between Scott and Amber, and they're feeling like, okay, like he's just not giving us anything, they decide to publicly announce Amber as Scott's girlfriend. This happened on January 24th, 2003. And I guess this was not what they wanted to do. They just wanted to keep everything, you know, wrapped up. But the National Enquirer, I guess, had just heard a story, and they didn't want the National Enquirer releasing it first and it just being this like a media circus. So they wanted to control the situation. And so they arranged for Amber to publicly talk to viewers in a press conference.
Okay, first of all, I met Scott Peterson November 20th, 2002. I was introduced to him. I was told he was unmarried. Scott told me he was not married. We did have a romantic relationship. When I discovered he was involved in the Laci Peterson disappearance case, I immediately contacted the Modesto Police Department. Although I could have sold the photos of Scott and I to tabloids, I knew this was not the right thing to do. For fear of jeopardizing the case or the police investigation, I will not comment further. I am very sorry for Laci's family and the pain that this has caused them. And I pray for her safe return as well. I would appreciate to my friends and acquaintances to refrain from talking about me to the media for profit or recognition. I am a single mother of a 23-month-old child, and I ask to respect my privacy. Thank you.
That clip, no matter how many times I've seen it, gives me like the same reaction every time. Like like, you watching her, you can just like see the fear in her. She's shaking. All she can really like muster up at that point is to keep it brief. But in the same sense, like, you can sense like she is a very strong, good-hearted woman. You know, she kept it brief. She emphasized like just the focus on Laci and being like, I want her found. I'm thinking of her family. And I thought it was like perfectly done. Afterwards, Laci's friends who were there saw her walk by and they went up to thank her for coming forward, because they're like, if you didn't, we wouldn't have known. And like, you know, now what do we do? Sharon also spoke with her and thanked her. And I guess she was actually able to sit down with Amber because she had so many questions about timelines and lies and stuff. And now she's like, with Scott lying about like trips and stuff like that she was on, or that he was on, and was able to go through like a daytimer, Amber said, and be like, okay, like he said he was here, but he was with you. Wow. And she's not mad at Amber. I made that seem like she's mad at Scott. Now, even after Amber did her press conference, her and Scott continued to talk. He has no idea that any of this is being recorded. And again, like, I'm laughing because it's uncomfortable, and like I'm gonna rage if I don't. So after she does the press conference, Scott calls and he tells her, like, I'm so proud of you. You did amazing. He says he had to pull over to throw up on the side of the road. She's like, what? You threw up? He's like, yeah, you just did so amazing. Like, I want to throw up. Diabolical. Now, publicly, up until this point, Laci's family had been supporting Scott. There were obviously like questions and stuff like that they were unsure about, but just like they just wanted to focus on Laci, give him the benefit of the doubt, figure out all of that stuff out once they found Laci. So once the affair was put out there, they cut all ties with him, made a public statement that they were no longer supporting him, and asked for him to cooperate with police, and that all they wanted was to find Laci. Up until this point, Scott had been silent in the media, which was something that led people to be, suspicious of him earlier, and saying that he didn't want to speak because he just wanted to keep the focus on Laci. He's saying, media's coming around. I know they want to talk to me, like this is what they want. So I'm just going to not talk, keep them coming so that we don't lose, push to find Laci, which I mean, hey, makes sense. But at this point, after Amber is, publicly announced, he goes like on a little bit of a media stint trying to suppress the backlash. Once again, I think the theme in all of this is every time Scott talks, there's just more questions, which absolutely happened in the interview. So one of them, I believe he did 4 interviews. One of them was with Diane Sawyer. And Diane brings up Diane, like I know her. Diane Sawyer, put some respect on her name, brings up the affair, and she catches him in a lie, because when she asks about the affair, she's like, did anybody know about it? And he's like, yeah, I told the police. In the very first interview that we had, I told the police. That was never mentioned at all whatsoever. What are you doing, Scott? You know that they're going to be watching, and you just like lied to Diane Sawyer and the nation?
I think everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance. And use the word murder, and yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. It's not one we're ready to accept, and it creeps in my mind late at night and early in the morning. And during the day, all we can think about is the right resolution is to find her well.
Was this the first time? Are there others out there?
No.
There's no one else who can come forward?
No. I owe a tremendous apology to everyone.
Had you told anyone? Did you tell police?
Told the police immediately.
When?
That was the first night we were together. The police, I spent with the police.
You told them about her?
Yeah, from December 24th on.
That wasn't true, and Scott Peterson called us after the interview to set the record straight. He said he never told the police about his affair with Amber Fry, but claims he did tell his wife.
Did your wife find out about it?
I told my wife.
When?
In early December.
Did it cause a rupture in the marriage?
It was not a positive, obviously. It's inappropriate. But it was not something that we weren't dealing with.
I guess after the interview, he like called to be like, yeah, I lied about that. So they included that. They're like, he did call, our producers later to tell us that that was a lie and that he never said anything. It's like, yeah, you didn't think Diane Sawyer was going to find that out? Diane Sawyer. Anyways, there was another interview that he did with a local reporter, Gloria Gomez, where he tells her, like, Laci knew about the affair. She wasn't upset about it. Like, they were fine and they were going to move on. That wasn't the most suspicious part about that interview, though. It was during one of the interviews with, like, local reporters where it was with Gloria. Sorry, not local. Also, put some respect on Gloria's name. She's sitting there, okay? And she says initially, like, she did get, like, a chill while she was sitting with Scott. Something wasn't feeling right. And you know what? Checks out. Didn't believe a word that was coming out of his mouth. Like, there was just, like, no emotion. And then at the point where their interview gets interrupted because his phone is, like, popping off. And he's like, do you want me to turn that off? And she's like, well, like, you can get it if you want. So he, like, goes around, walks around, turns it off, and then, like, sits down and he's like, yeah, okay, so, like, you can ask the question again. She's, like, dumbfounded that incoming phone call is coming on his cell, and he silences it and carries on with the information. She's like, that could be, like, we could be sitting here right now and the case is broke. Like, your wife is missing. This could be about her and you're not answering. He just, like, carries on. He's like, so can you ask the question again? Scott.
So I called it a pack of lies, not knowing that she was in there. So it's just not important to comment about that. And I'm glad that Amber came forward. You want me to turn that off?
Yeah, what is that?
That's my phone, unfortunately. I thought it was off. And I'll just answer that question again. Somewhere here.
It sound like a phone.
Yeah, it's kind of going crazy, isn't it? Ah. Okay. Yeah, so if you just want to ask your question again, I'll just...
Okay. So, once again, if you can just talk...
It was bad. It really, really bad. And not only was Scott and Amber's phone calls recorded, but investigators had also tapped Scott's phones to hear all of the calls coming in, keep tabs on him. And that was really interesting to see. Like, I love Sharon Rocha. I don't know her, but I love what I see. I think she's just, like, such a strong, stoic, amazing woman. And I didn't realize, like, until I had read the transcripts, like, how much, like, she did get a chance to lay into him. Like, there was one conversation where she's just like, where's my daughter? And he's like, Mom, I don't know. She's like, cut the shit. Like, tell me where she is. I want to bring her home. Like, this is the least you can do. Where is she? Like, you've been lying this whole time to everybody.
Scott?
Yeah.
Where are you?
I just loaded up all the stuff for the LA Command Center.
Oh.
Just left the volunteer center. I gave a couple interviews to the press and then...
Well, since you've managed to lose all of my confidence in you, what I want to know is where's my daughter?
I wish I knew, Mom. I wish I knew where she is.
Yeah, you do know. You do know where she is, and I want you to tell me, where is Laci and her baby? Where did you put them?
Where is my wife and our child? I don't know.
You killed my daughter, didn't you?
No, I didn't, Mom.
Yes, you did, Scott. And I want to know. Just let me bring my daughter home, okay? That's all I want. I don't want anything else from you. I want you to tell me where my daughter is. I want to be able to bury my daughter. Now, would you tell me where she is?
Don't know where she is. I want my wife.
Stop lying, I'm tired of your lies. You have looked me in the eye for weeks and been lying to me. You've looked me in the eye for years and been lying to me and to Laci. Now where is she?
I wish I knew.
You don't know. Stop lying. For once in your life, take some responsibility and tell the goddamn truth.
So I thought, like, you go, Sharon. And then also between a lot of the calls with family and friends, he's already like placing, little crumbs of judgment on the detectives, specifically for them having so many of their resources in the Berkeley Marina where he had been fishing that day. And he's manipulating Laci's family like it's such a waste. We're wasting time finding Laci. Like they're not going to find anything. Like we need to move on. And, I found it interesting that he thought it was a waste, but there was a tracker on him. And it shows that he'd rented a car, I believe on like 3 or 4 separate occasions, and drove out to the marina to watch from afar. There were detectives that had spotted him in a different vehicle, just like sitting, lurking, and then like a couple minutes later, he would drive back home. Again, keep in mind, this is not like down the road. This is like 90 miles away. Personally, I would think, okay, if you're there, make it known, like see how you can help. Either one, if you think that they're wasting resources, like why are you taking the time to drive all the way out there when you could be looking in the places that you think she is? Or 2, if you're like, hey, what's going on and you're concerned, like make the presence known. Ask how you can help. Do you want to like show more clear where you were, who you talked, There is another call that's suspicious about the marina prior to Amber coming forward when the family was still supporting Scott. And it was announced that sonar had picked up a large object in the water and they were sending divers down to retrieve it. So everybody is waiting on bated breath to see like what is this, calling around, and it turns out that it was an anchor. So Sharon calls Scott to let him know. That call goes to voicemail, which is picked up because the wires, his calls are wiretapped, and you can hear him listening to the voicemail. And when Sharon says it's an anchor, he whistles like this, like relief, It wasn't like okay, yeah, thank God, like where are they? It was just like you can hear the difference between the concern of relief but also despair, because it's like at least it's not her, but where is she? And him, it was like a whew, dodged that one. He calls her back, and then since he had already had everybody convinced that they're wasting their time, he's like, yeah, well, we knew we weren't going to find anything, like now they can leave the area and search elsewhere. And then in the transcripts, you see like he calls a bunch of people. Like he's very excited to be able to call everybody and be like, it was a big old anchor. That's what he calls it. He's like, yep, just a big old anchor. It's just weird. Sadly, on April 13th, 2003, a couple was walking their dog and found the decomposing body of a full-term male fetus on this marshy area of the San Francisco Bay. It was in Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park. This is an area that is within the Modesto Marina. I've never been, so I don't like geographically, like logistically know. But this is the area of that bay, like the name. One day later, another passerby, found the body of a woman washed up on the eastern rocky shoreline of the bay. This was 1 mile away from where the baby was found. The woman's remains were decomposed to the point of almost being like unrecognizable as a human body. There were like barnacles on her bones, and the body was missing the head and arms and most of the legs. Like one leg was like pretty high up, and then the other, I believe there was still some below the knee. Hearing the news for Laci's family and friends, it was like it's like what they didn't want to hear but knew, what the outcome was going to be. And sure enough, on April 18th, 2003, DNA results verified that the bodies were Laci and her unborn son, Connor. Something else that Scott's supporters hold on to is the condition of Connor's body. And they push the narrative that Laci was kidnapped and kept alive for some time. And that's why they were in two different, states of decomposition. Connor is described as being somewhat decomposed, but still like fully intact. And so the medical examiner thought this was because he was protected inside of Laci until her uterus decomposed and then he was expelled into the bay. The medical examiner described that this can happen, with just like the gases that build up within the body. They will, deliver and expel the fetus. And so he had floated out, and then obviously they weren't together, so had floated apart. His umbilical cord was also torn, so it wasn't cut. It wasn't like somebody had kept him alive, delivered him, and then disposed of the bodies. It was torn. And he also didn't show any signs of injuries of being born, and the OBGYN saying that if he was born, there would be he would be viable. There didn't seem to be any injuries that he was killed and then placed there. When Connor was found, it's important to know that he was also found with about 30, just under 30 centimeters worth of what's described as tape around his torso, head, and shoulders. Now the autopsy photos are rightfully sealed, but they have released what the tape or twine that was found. Yeah, and to me it doesn't look like tape or that it was deliberately wrapped on him like some of Scott's supporters suggest. It looks like debris from the water. Initially when I looked at it, I thought it almost looked like a plastic shopping bag. I don't know, maybe twine. I guess you wouldn't know until you saw it up close. But that, for them supports the narrative that somebody did, deliberately put it on him and then left him there. So once Laci and Connor are found near the area where Scott admitted to be the last day that she was seen alive. So I'm going to pull up, I'm not going to pull it up, my amazing editors, Jay and Kaya, give them some love again. I love when you guys do that. They will pull it up for you. So the map where Laci and Connor were found were obviously near. So you can see on the map where it says Berkeley Marina, you see Connor's recovery site, and then you see Laci's recovery site. So this is so telling, and it's kind of frustrating when his supporters just try to have all of these explanations for it. We'll get into a little bit more of that later shortly here. But I feel like once you actually you how close it is, and it's not really that far, and the chances, just the chances of this happening, it further clarifies. But something else that you want to look at in this map is some of Scott's supporters say that where Connor was found, you can see that they believe he was placed in that site because you can see that there are rocks that form some barriers there. And he was just behind one of these rock barriers. To me, it's even embarrassing to try to go to that angle because it's called the tide. Those rocks weren't they're not holding off from the water. It's just the tide. So those, it comes and goes. You can see how high up that tide goes, where there's divots that collect little river waters and stuff like that. So anyways, I needed to talk about that because it frustrates me. Now, obviously, once they're found, there's this urgency to put the full case together. And while they're doing that, they're tracking Scott on the tracker that they placed on his vehicle, and they see that he's in San Diego at the time with his family. And since this is close to the Mexican border, they make the decision to follow him. And it was very a very OJ following. According to Scott, he and his family, he believed that the media was following him, and he's like, I don't want to deal with this media circus right now. So he's trying to get away from them, driving so erratically that there was even a helicopter that couldn't find him at one point. So once he's now trying to flee, the decision was made to put the sirens on and arrest him. Once again, more pieces of the puzzle just not looking good for Scott at this arrest. When he's arrested, he has his hair dyed. Hair dyed, beard bleached. It's supposed to be blonde. It's quite orange. He's carrying his brother's ID. He's got $15,000 on him, as well as pesos, 4 cell phones, extensive survival gear like a knife. He's got a tent, a shovel, water purifying equipment, like, in case he's going to go in the bush to survive. He's got a gun, all of his clothes, and some Viagra pills, because horny bastard, right? When asked why he dyed his hair, again, not funny. Like, I just want to rage. Scott tells them, it got bleached from the swimming pool. No, like, did you douse your hair in Sun-In before going into this said pool? Like, if we could just lighten our hair in swimming pools, those who want to be blonde would just do that, Scott. It's not how it works. He also had an explanation for the $15,000. He said that his mom had accidentally made a withdrawal from him of $15,000 and then just gave him the cash, and then he was going to put it in. But in the same sense, his family also tried to say that the reason he was using his brother's ID was so that he could get a discount at the golf course so he could go golfing. He had never been scheduled to go golfing. And why would you need your brother's ID for the golf discount if you had 15 grand on you? Once again, that was Quirky Motor from Reddit. Great point. Why would he? Why would you need the 15? Why would you need the discount and to like dye your hair to like pass for your brother when you have $15,000 on you? I can't. Again, Quirky Motor, job offer, still available. Now beware. His supporters say that he only had enough things in his car for a camping trip, but I guess a full inventory was done to show that Scott pretty much had like packed everything that he owned in the car. So he was booked into county jail and charged with double murder on April 18th, 2003. Like I said at the beginning, the evidence in this case is largely circumstantial, but once you put it all together, like it's a troubling picture. It's very, very hard to, like keep turning your head when you're getting like, there's more evidence this way. And then it's like, let's try to explain it. Like, and nothing's being explained away. Okay. So according to the prosecutors, they believed that Scott killed Laci on either the evening of the 23rd of December, 2002, or the morning, the 24th. So Christmas Eve, and did so via a non-bloody method. So like I believe the term is like soft kill. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. Nicely, don't make me cry. So they believed either she was, smothered or strangled, something like that wouldn't have like left more DNA and a mess for him to clean up. He then wrapped her in a tarp, put her in his truck, placed the umbrellas over her to hide the body, like while he was driving to his warehouse, took her out, and then put her in the boat. Remember, this boat that was unregistered, recently purchased, secretly drove 90 miles away to the Berkeley Marina. That evidence is just so strong. I don't believe that he intended for them to be found. We'll get into like the speculation of how their bodies were undetected for so long, but prosecution believes that they were held down, or at least he was held down by concrete anchors, and that like just like from the weight of like the gases and everything building up, like you're buoyant, so that often bodies can be found in water at some time because you'll float back up to the surface, and just so the weight of that going and the anchors not being strong enough, it also explains why not all of her like made it the way up, like because it's like her torso and the gases within her coming up. Even though the case is circumstantial, it's a lot of strong circumstances. There's the fact that he denied that there's any issues in the marriage, saying neither of them had affairs, and then Amber Frey comes forward. Every time Scott spoke about Laci in interviews with detective, it was always in the past tense, like, I loved her. One of the first things he also asked Detective Brocchini when Laci had only been missing for a few hours was after that conversation, and it's like wrapping up, seeing if he needs anything. Scott says, oh yeah, I need numbers for a grief counselor. And Detective Brocchini's like, oh, okay, well, like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you saw my mother-in-law and how upset she is. She's going to need to talk to somebody. And Detective Brocchini says, well, usually we absolutely have resources for you, but we just give them when, there's been a death or, like the search doesn't end well. And Scott's like, yeah, oh yeah, of course. Like, we wouldn't need to call if she's found in the next couple days. But if we don't, like, can I have those numbers? And then Detective Brocchini says, yeah. And he said, okay, yeah, like, Laci's mom's, like, Sharon's going to need them. And so, yeah, that was 6 hours. She'd only been missing for 6 hours when he's asking that. Their neighbors also said that the blinds were closed, like, for most of the day, well, for the entire day. And that was very unusual if Laci was home, especially if she was home, like, cooking and getting ready for her plans that evening. We also have the fact that Scott told many people that he had golfed when he didn't, but then was coming forward to investigators who were going to be able to trace what he had done that day that he was fishing. So everybody was getting different versions of what happened. Prosecution also felt that it was suspicious that he had agreed to a polygraph and then refused it the next day, which that does not prove somebody's guilt. A polygraph is also not completely reliable. Some people do think like, okay, well, if you already had agreed to it and this could have just like progressed things even further from turning away from you, why wouldn't you do it? And Scott's supporters say that it wasn't really Scott who had denied it. It was his dad who found out that he was being asked about it, immediately got Scott an attorney, and wasn't going to speak with the police department without, an attorney, and wasn't going to consent to this polygraph. I guess Scott also asked Detective Brocchini within that 24-hour frame if they had already got cadaver dogs out to search for Laci, and Detective Brocchini again is like, we're not at that point. Like, usually they're used for sniffing out dead bodies. Like, are you knowing a little bit more than we are? Like, we're just thinking she's missing at this point. We just want to find her alive. Once the search warrants were executed for their home, vehicles, and Scott's business as well, Scott was not happy. I guess the statement that he made to Detective Brocchini was, where's the trust? And just like, it's these things, it's the piling of all this stuff that it's like, what do you mean? Like, if you did nothing wrong, what do you mean, where's the, like, this is their job. We need to eliminate you, go through that entire process as quickly as possible so that we can move on. Scott, in addition to the umbrellas that Scott said that he was going to store at his warehouse but didn't, detectives also found the tarp coverings that he said he had used in the backyard, and they were spread across several of the sheds. They also found the boat cover, which was in Scott's truck when they saw it on the 24th, but days after, when they come back, it had been placed under this leaking leaf blower in the shed, and it was leaking gasoline, and it was so soaked with gasoline. They had to dry them out for 2 days, I guess, and since that smell was so strong, when they did have cadaver dogs come to the property, they weren't able to do anything for like 2 days because they were completely confused and not able to, even find anything to kind of go on the right track, which made me wonder about the comments about the cadaver dogs, like prior, like was that the point of like just dousing the things that were like on your vehicle used to transport? And I've been through his supporters websites and stuff like that. And again, I just feel like it's like the blind leading the blind or something. I'm just not understanding because they contradict themselves so much. So in some instances, they don't want to hold any weight to the cadaver dogs, but then in others, they want to rely heavily on them. So one of the things that they want to rely and hold a lot of weight on the cadaver dogs is that there were water. I didn't even realize this was a thing. Like water cadaver dogs that were brought to the marina, and they weren't alerting to anything earlier in the investigation when it was initially found out that he had gone there. And so they take that as that means that Laci wasn't there and that they were taken afterwards. So somebody found out that Scott was there and then framed him after and had just been keeping the bodies up until that point. The prosecutors also found it suspicious that some of the jewelry that Scott said Laci was wearing was found at home in the jewelry box. It could have just been that he didn't notice, if she had stopped wearing it or whatever, or was he trying to like kind of line up like a robbery angle? Also, though, the shoes that Laci always wore on walks, which he's saying that was her plan, they were found in the home. I think all I've seen, and I don't know if I just didn't remember or what, but the only thing that I've seen that has a slight, connection to like DNA, like the smoking gun evidence, was that in Scott's boat, there was a rusted pair of pliers and there was a black hair that was stuck to them. And there was quite extensive testing that had to be done to it. And it ended up coming back, not like fully being like a positive match to Laci, but it was consistent with Laci's hair. The test came back showing that the hair belonged to a relative of Sharon Rocha, her mother. And I didn't know that. I used to hold so much weight on the concrete, the concrete molds and stuff like that were in his warehouse. Among other things, the fact that they were found 90 minutes away when he was there anyways. But that, I was like, you guys, what? And again, it's frustrating to go on the supporter sites because just like the nitpicking of like trying to explain things and then just being like, well, it wasn't like confirmed. It's like, that's pretty strong to have hair of somebody who belonged to, was related to Sharon Rocha in a boat that nobody knew about. And touching on the circular impressions of the concrete residue in his warehouse. So detectives found that in his boat there was a homemade anchor. Scott says that he had just made one anchor and he made it himself so that he could save $3 or $30 at the boat shop of buying an anchor, and he was just going to make it himself. And he said that he had just put concrete in this like little like bucket and rigged up his own. When they searched the warehouse though, they see that there's concrete residue, and it looks like there's 4 circular impressions that match the anchor that he did have in the boat, but there was like 3 others that were missing. And it looks on the ground that you can see the outline of like the dust of the concrete, and it's like, okay, so where it looks like you made more, where are the others? It was also discovered that he had purchased 90 pounds of concrete and made only one 8-pound anchor. And he didn't really have an answer for what he did with all of this concrete. It's changed a lot. He threw it away. He brought it back after he was working on some fence posts in the back of their house in September. He said he used it to fill up a hole that was on the driveway. Like, nobody knows what the story is. Well, I guess, no, to be fair, his supporters, I think now are sticking to the fact that they're saying that his computer showed that he had budgeted for 10 60-pound bags of concrete or something like that in September to do the fence work. After the fence was done, he returned some of it to Lowe's on the 1st of November. And then they say that the residue in the back of the trailer was from the bags that Scott had like stacked while he was doing that work in September. And while I do agree that, yeah, there are areas in the photos where you can see it does look like that kind of like rectangular bag that you would get like from concrete stacked up. When you look at different angles of all of the photos that were taken of those outlines, you can see there's definitely more than one circular shape of an anchor being made. I feel like that can also be interpreted as being like, you see what you want to see. Maybe they don't see it. It's not clear. Like, they're not like, sand, like this is clear. But when you look at things, you can see like even like semicircles, multiple in different areas. So yeah, it's tough. So that weight of the concrete had kind of shifted for me a little bit as not being as strong. But then when I was like, oh, with the pliers, with the hair and the pliers. Now, Scott says, even though we're saying like, oh, about the boat that nobody knew about, Scott's saying Laci did know about the boat. He's saying they were going to use it. They were going to surprise Ron, like her stepdad, who also likes fishing, by saying that they bought it when they went to go see them on Christmas Eve. And it's like, why would you say that as a surprise? Like, was the boat's not for Ron? Why be like, let's not tell them till Christmas? It just doesn't make sense. It's like, of course we can just like nitpick and pick things apart, but it's like when it's this many things, like that doesn't make any sense. Just like Laci knew about the affairs, like, come on. And one thing that prosecutors feel support that Laci didn't know it was that she had gone to the warehouse on December 20th, I believe. Could have even been the 23rd. I think that's the shop owners next to them are unsure about the date, but they had seen Laci shortly prior to her disappearing, and she had used their washroom. Scott's supporters say that the reason why Laci had gone next door to the other shop owner to use the bathroom is because his warehouse was just like packed to the brim and hard to get to the washroom. Other people on the other side of things and prosecutors definitely argued that it was because he didn't want her to go in there and see the boat. Because she didn't know about the boat, even if he's saying that she knew about the boat. And it's so hard to trust Scott about anything. And I try to be sensitive, like, about, again, some of his family that don't believe that he's guilty. Because, again, we don't know what it's like to have somebody that you care about, like, be in this situation. But it's like, what aren't we seeing? Like, there's more actions. Of course, like, people can be like, okay, well, like, he's a liar. So when he says things like, oh yeah, like, Laci knew about it, I don't trust it. And then the actions, like, some of them are just like nasty. Like, at one point, and he was like hindering the investigation. At one point, he refused to get Laci's dental records for the Modesto PD, and he did this for weeks. And he wouldn't just like outright refuse, but he just had excuses. Like, he'd be like, oh, I don't know the address or to the dentist. Like, I'm still trying to look that up, or I don't even remember what dentist she goes to. I'm trying to figure that out. And then when police actually did get the records, they find out that Scott and Laci had the same dentist. So it's things like that, you know. He also never inventoried any of Laci's things when she went missing. Like, he didn't go to look to see if like her purse or cell phone or coat or shoes like that she would normally go on a walk were there. Like, it was her friends and families and detectives that were finding this information out as they were going. He also, the first day, went up to Sharon and was like, if they find any blood in my truck, it's because I work with my hands. I've been in the warehouse, I work a lot, and I cut myself. And I think he offers that type of information, like the information that he wants up, when he knows that there's half truths there and stuff, right? I don't think that there was this big bloody scene, and that the cut that he did have on his hand was just like an ick. It could have been transporting, or could have happened anywhere, but not at that moment of her losing her life, if that makes any sense. Not to mention how good this guy proves that he lies. You hear his voice in the conversations with Amber Frey saying that he's in Paris, describing the scene, the crowd, the Eiffel Towers, all of the lights, just the vibe. He is making you believe he is right there. You've got him on, again, camera, Diane Sawyer, straight face looking at Diane. I told investigators about the affair. First day they interviewed me. No, you didn't. But you see how good he lies, right? Even when he was shown, I know you guys are so much we're going through. It's just you got to get out all the pile, right? But when he's shown a photo after the investigators learn about Amber, and then they're seeing they're gonna test him to see if he's gonna come clean, and they show them the photo of Amber and him at her boss's Christmas party. Sit him down, it's recorded, and they showed it to him, and he says, "You don't think that's me, do you?" He's just a seasoned liar. He lies, I guess, about everything based on those who know him. He lied to people, things that don't even make sense. He lied to people about buying his house with cash. He lied about having a second debit card. I guess he had 2 debit cards. One was linked to a PayPal account that Laci didn't even know about, and this was the account that he would use to buy girlfriends things. He bought Amber's daughter a Christmas present through that site as well. And this is just this is what he does. Just a big fat liar. Which brings us to the other affairs that Scott had. I myself also did think that Amber was just the only one that had an affair with Scott and came forward. And that's not true. Scott, from what we know, had at least 4 affairs while he was married to Laci. Some of them were very, very casual, and then some of them were more serious. One woman he dated, her name is Janet, and they dated for around 5 months. He's telling her the same things that he was telling Amber, planning a future, wanting to meet her family. And allegedly, Janet walked in on Scott and Laci in bed because she was trying to surprise him one day. And that's how she found out that he was married. There's another woman named Michelle that said, came forward and said that she had met Scott. They went on a couple dates. There was also somebody he briefly dated named Katie. And then, again, shout out Quirky Mortar. And then there was another unnamed woman that had a one-night stand with Scott in Vegas who came forward. And then obviously there's Amber. And being just a dirty, dirty cheater doesn't make you a murderer. But again, in this situation, it just shows that Scott's able to cheat on his wife, date several women, and morph into whatever he needed. We learned that he told Sean about one of the women who was a health nut, a vegetarian, and then all of a sudden he's, taking care of himself, running, getting to the gym, and he's vegetarian. When he dated Amber, she's very into religion and saying she was wanting to pursue more of that career-wise. And so he purchases a degree in divinity and bought this a week before Laci died. He tried to say that Laci got it as a gag gift for him, but it's first, it was on his card. Second, if you're going to get a gag gift, first of all, what's the relevance of a fake diploma? But wouldn't you save it for Christmas? Right before Christmas, you think you just hold the gag gift for Christmas morning and be here, that's all I got you. surprise. And then, you know, take out your other stuff. Like, there's just, I don't know. Like, I just want to stab myself in the face because it's so frustrating. Allegedly, even after Laci's missing, he's still a dirty dog. Prior to him being arrested, he's staying with his half-sister in San Diego. And while he's there, his sister's babysitter is there. And he's offering to make her mixed drinks. And he's calling them like flirtinis. And like making comments about her. I guess his mother was also there and made a comment saying, I hope Scott can meet a nice girl like you. I think this is according to the babysitter. And it made her so uncomfortable that she never came back. Like, she left and never came back. Like, Laci's already gone at this point. And there's been a lot of debate whether Scott wanted to be a dad or not. Based on his words, it's pretty clear, like just even in those conversations with Amber saying straight up he wanted to have a vasectomy and that another baby would be a deal breaker. However you want to look at that though, if you're a supporter of Scott's and be like, oh, it's just because he didn't want to like have one with Amber, that's not the only situation. While they were trying to get pregnant, Brent's wife, so Laci's brother's wife, her sister-in-law, they're talking about it and saying, you know, like it's been a long road. And he makes this joke, Scott makes this joke saying like, I'm hoping for infertility. Like, how insensitive for a woman to be struggling getting pregnant. That does like such a toll on you. And then to like have like a joke like that from your support, I don't know. Weird joke. Could be their humor though, his humor. But there's like another home. It was known around the family. This isn't all of a sudden like his supporters being like, no, he did want kids. It's like this was known. And on a home video, there's a clip of Scott and he's, you know, handed a baby and the baby starts crying. And he's like, well, this isn't very fun. And then Laci makes a comment like, this is the only time they're ever going to see him do that. And she starts laughing and like referring to him holding a baby. So clearly like it was something that people were known, something that people knew. But then you've got Scott's supporters who are like, no, he was trying. He was even had a Viagra subscription so that when she was ovulating, you know, like he was making sure like he was ready to go so that he was also like contributing to get pregnant. And I think at the end of the day, we don't really know what's in his heart. Maybe he was like kind of scared about it and then sometimes wasn't. And it's clear they obviously had made the decision together to have a child and try and, you know, put in effort for several years to keep doing that. So I don't know what's in his heart. All I go based off of is like his actions and his character and his words and his lies. And what his true character shows is like, you know, he's able to be somebody this deceptive while married to Laci, able to like cover his tracks well enough to present himself as this like doting, perfect husband to Laci and their friends and families. And then meanwhile, he's doing what he was doing behind everybody's back. And it wasn't until things started to come to light and he no longer had Laci's family support that I think they also started to see even more of who his character was. For example, the Rochas, they really wanted to have some of Laci's things as like mementos of her, like her diary and stuff like that. And Scott wouldn't let them. He apparently contacted the security company and said like the Rochas, no roaches. Like this is Scott's property. There's no roaches allowed in this place. So Sharon actually had to break into the house to get some of the things. There was no charges filed against the Rochas. Again, I had a like, you go Sharon moment. Like, it's just so sad, especially because it's not like he was wanting to hold on to things for mementos. He wasn't trying to hold on to Laci's things. Like he was wanting to get rid of everything, only 3 weeks after she was reported missing, he's calling realtors to sell the house. He told realtors also to not say to anybody in the press that he was wanting to do it, but he wanted it sold as is, completely furnished, everything in it, and says like, oh, even if Laci comes back, like, we're not going to stay in this house. So even though like he's wanting to like sell everything as is, like he didn't want to give her family like her wedding dress or like decor in the home that symbolized her. So I think like those types of things show his character. Also, in early January, when she'd only been missing for 3 weeks, he calls Dish Network and gets the Playboy channel added. Then a few days later, he cancels it. And then he adds an even like more hardcore channel that was like even more money. Someone who's like frugal enough to make their own homemade anchors so that they don't have to buy the $30 one, like upping the cost because the Playboy channel wasn't enough for him. So you see, there's a lot of situations here that definitely don't paint like the best picture here. And I think at the end of the day, him trying to like steer away from the detection, like the search from the marina was so telling. And then for their bodies to end up there, I do believe at the end of the day, if they never were found, I don't think that the case, like with everything, the case like could have been strong enough. And I think that for him, like pushing even her family to try to get them away and be like, you know, like we're mad, like why aren't the search efforts elsewhere? It's because he knew what they could possibly find. Ultimately, Amber, I think, was one of the strongest witnesses to hit the stand. There was like over, I think, 100 witnesses for the prosecution. And then Amber was able to get on the stand. And then this is where everybody finds out exactly what was being played, like what was recorded. Up until this point, nobody knew that she was recording everything. And so those conversations were played in court. And it's like, again, one of those moments where it's like hearing it for the first time. You're just like, what the hell? And that's where you really get to see his own actions paint the picture for you without having the smoking gun evidence. For the defense, they had a variety of theories. And I feel like while that's good to impose reasonable doubt, it also just like it also turns more away from the theories and the possibilities because none of them make sense when you're still trying to get back to the marina. Like we have to get back to where they were found, and all of their theories, they just don't make sense. So Scott had his defense lawyer, Mark Garagos. He's like a celebrity attorney. So the fact that he had him was also like big news. And he maintains that Scott was innocent. Laci disappeared after he had already left for the day and had basically opened up their case. Yeah. What am I trying to say? I've been talking too long. I'm sorry. There's just so much to go through. But he had been saying that, you know, I'm producing witnesses that saw Laci that morning, witnesses that saw that Scott's boat was empty, and witnesses who saw a pregnant woman being pushed in a van. This witness's name was Tom Harshman, and none of these witnesses ended up testifying or coming to trial. But let's go over some of the theories that they had. One of them was that she was abducted by one of the men that was robbing the neighbors across the street from her, the Medinas. And they're saying that must have happened around 11:40 a.m. on Christmas Eve. This, they said, is corroborated by the witness Diane Jackson, who saw a van in the area at that time. The problem with that is that Diane has never said that she saw anybody being like put into a van. She says that the van that she saw, at first, she thought that it was like a landscaper van. So it could have been like, it could have been a landscaper. It could have been the Medina. The thing is that there was nobody who witnessed like this confrontation happening in front of the Medina's house, or that it was Laci for that matter. They also tried to say that she was abducted by a family in a brown van, and used as some sort of satanic ritual. And one of the pieces that they had of trying to eliminate Scott from being in the home that morning and that Laci was still alive was that he described the morning. She was up earlier. She had a little bit of cereal. He wakes up. She decides to just have a little bit with him while he's like sitting down having his breakfast and talking about their day. And then he mentions that her favorite show, Martha Stewart, was on, and that he didn't remember what it was about, but he remembered hearing something about meringue. And there was a transcript that was pulled up, or I think even the clip of Martha Stewart, and there was a clip on there where meringue was being discussed. So they're like, why would he have Martha Stewart on if she wasn't alive at that point? Like, why would he sit down and watch this? So at that point, the jury was listening, like definitely like, oh, really, good point. They also really focused on like the whole tunnel vision thing. They're saying that the detectives never interviewed any sex offenders in the area. Detective Burkini said that was a straight up lie, that they did interview some of them, but they were so... some of them, most of them, I think, that were in the area, like, were very elderly, like that, like nothing, I don't know, not like that they, you know what I mean? They probably wouldn't have been like able to overpower her. And I think if you look at the number of theories that they have, whether it's they're saying that they had all of these different witnesses who saw somebody matching Laci's description walking. Each of them have, first of all, there are different locations that they've spotted her. And each of them have, not each of them, but like the majority of them have like, oh, I heard a scream. Oh, I heard somebody try, or I saw somebody try to like pull a pregnant woman into a van. And then with the defense, so, like they're like, oh, we've got this scenario. This is happening here. All these people are seeing. And then there's all these catastrophes going on. But then they keep going back to the burglars across the street for the Medina's house. Like in every one of those theories, like it doesn't make sense. So you would have to, so whether it was somebody, let's not focus on the robbers right now. Let's go from her walk, where she would have been abducted by a multitude of different people at the same time. So unless we're like living in an alternate universe and this is all happening, but like in different time forms, and then they cross the line, doesn't make sense. But let's pretend like it does for a second. Okay, so she's been abducted, and then after like surviving at least like 4 of the abductions, one of them sticks. They drive her back to her house, let the dog go with the leash outside of the house. They change her clothes because she's not wearing, when she was found, what witnesses were saying that she was wearing, which is what Scott believed she was wearing. So it was almost like this is what they're hearing him describe seeing her in last. And then she was out in that outfit, but then she came back home, she changed, she took off her walking shoes, and then they held on to her for like a couple weeks until the police announced that they were looking at the Berkeley Marina where Scott was, and then they decide to drive her out there to frame the husband. What are we talking about? And it couldn't have been the robbers that were holding on to her and keeping her alive, because they were arrested, I think 3 days prior to the public learning that Scott was ever at the marina. So was it your family who his supporters are alleging are big fat liars and giving them alibis, saying like they're accounted for, they were not there on Christmas Eve, like it had to be when they're saying it is? So was it also them who held on to Laci and then framed her husband? Like it just doesn't make sense, no matter how you spin it. So like when there's like all these theories that go online about all these people who saw Laci, and it just like not, regardless, none of it made sense. Doesn't make sense. It doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. It makes more sense that the reason why Scott had all the stuff, the tarps and the umbrellas piled and everything, was to transport her to the warehouse, get her in the boat, drive out to the Berkeley Marina, where they ended up being found, and dumped their bodies and weighed them down with the weights that are unaccounted for and only one is. That's what makes more sense. I'll leave the link to the kind of like the defense side of things. There is like the full case file on there, transcripts, photos, a bunch of theories and stuff, but I feel like even going through it, it was more confirmation for me because like everything was there. And I was like, okay, are you guys reading and watching what you're putting up here? Because this makes like even more sense. And they hold on so strongly to witnesses like for the defense that came forward that were like completely discredited. Like one of them being, again, going back to somebody trying to frame Scott and them trying to show that Connor was measuring later than, like the growth later than Laci, what it would have been like when Laci went missing. And the expert that they had wasn't even a medical examiner to do that. I think he was like a fertility specialist or something like that. So they thought he had more weight because like that was his wheelhouse. But then on cross-examination, like he had completely gotten obliterated because it's like they were like nickel and diming about like sizes and trying to show like, oh, it's like he was already taken out. He was placed here. This is framing. And it just didn't make sense. They're like, did you do any of the measurements for Laci? Like, are you her OBGYN? No. You're basing assumptions. And he was also basing assumptions off of Laci not being accurate about her own time frame. Like that, like she was saying that she was a week later than she actually was or something like that. Or a week earlier. No, later. That she had kept it from family and friends like for a little bit longer because she had a friend who had a baby shower the weekend that she found out and then she announced it later. Like it just... like again, like the nickel and diming. They also tried to have like one of those like Perry Mason moments. I don't know if Perry Mason is going to fit for this. Columbo, I don't know. Murder, She Wrote, where the defense had filmed like an experiment. They bought a boat similar to the one that Scott had and then had like 100-pound weight and went into the water and tried to show that it would have been impossible for him to like throw a body over without capsizing the boat. And then there was an expert like fisherman or something that weighed in on it because this actually didn't even get admitted into court. But somebody who was weighing in on it being like, you'd notice like that you can't go off to the side of it. You'd have to like put the body off like on the back of the boat. Like you're not going to put it off the side and like tip over. You're going to go to the back of the boat and that's how it is. So anyways, it didn't matter. The defense didn't even get to show it because the judge was like, that's an experiment. We're not going to do this. But then I guess Mark Garagos left the boat like a block away from the courthouse and then was like encouraging people to go and see it so they could see the size. And that was like just to like try to fuck with the jury's head and stuff like that. But it didn't end up working. It turned into like a shrine for Laci and baby Connor. So it was kind of like, yeah, now we're just going to keep remembering them even further, not like sit there and analyze how you could do something. And I don't think you were allowed to do like your own like experiments without something being presented and allowed. In terms of motive, I think everybody goes to initially like the misconception was he wanted to leave Laci for Amber. And I don't believe that that's true. The defense said something along the lines of like, he was never going to leave Laci for Amber. Laci was more attractive. Like, what the fuck? Okay. Quirky motor. Again, job offer, 2 hours into this video. I don't even know how long we're at. Still open. But put it so brilliantly. It really, at the end of the day, it really didn't matter whether Amber was the one pursuing him or not. The fact of the matter was his actions, his ability to lie. And if he wasn't into Amber, there would have been a point where he could have just like stopped talking to her. She didn't know where he lived. He could have just stopped talking to her. Not only does he not stop talking to her after his wife goes missing, he's carrying on the charade. Like he's still keeping her there, planning for the future, lying and saying he's on this trip. Meanwhile, his wife is pregnant and missing, due like in weeks. So but again, like if we want to look at it like he wasn't that serious, it's really irrelevant at that point. He had already done so many deceitful things multiple times over the course of this entire relationship. It's sounding like, and I believe like when he says that, he wasn't in love with Amber, he probably wasn't, but he was definitely like in love with himself and like the lifestyle that he had. If, he was able to pretty much go out and do whatever he wanted, and having a child does change that dynamic. And we are learning so much more through talking about these domestic violence cases, that how much more vulnerable you are. Your chances of being murdered when you are a pregnant woman like skyrocket when you're once you become pregnant. It's so much, it goes so much higher. And this is a prime example of that. The defense tried to focus on the fact that Scott he'd never been violent. That's not like a requirement for domestic violence of somebody just like flipping the switch. Look at Chris Watts. Like that to do that to your family, he was the same way, presenting himself as just like so supportive, like even like a little bit like meek and timid in some senses, having a full-blown affair, had never been violent to his wife or children, and was able to do that to them. And that's terrifying. Ultimately, in November 2004, Scott was found guilty of first-degree murder for the death of Laci, and also second-degree murder for Connor's death. He was sentenced to death and taken off to serve at San Quentin State Prison. I don't even know a lot about prisons, but I know that one's not a good one. So what happens when somebody is automatically or sentenced to death? They're automatically kind of like entered into like an appeal process. So right away, his defense issued an appeal. One of their biggest thing was that he had he wasn't given a fair trial, like just based on the media attention and everything like that. He was never going to be able to get a fair trial because of, like the court of public opinion. But once again, some words from Quirky Motor. You got to remember, while that can be true, there have also been like really high profile cases where we think like, oh, there's no question, there's no way. And if you have a good lawyer, which Scott had like one of the best lawyers, then they should be able to present the case that is going to get you off. And one of the examples that was given that enraged me, but it was like, yeah, all right, it's true, was Casey Anthony. I feel like she just didn't have as many question marks. She had a lot, but as many as Scott. And then obviously it was like the bodies coming up. Like he did not expect that. So in Casey's case, there was like like an argument to be said about like other options that could have happened, and then saying that, ultimately coming out and saying that she made a mistake and she knew that was going to happen and then put it on her dad. Reasonable doubt, right? That wasn't in this case. But anyways, just to show that like the public had already tried that. The public isn't the one going on there. And when you watch the Netflix documentary, there's one of the jurors who, like, I was laughing when we were watching it on Patreon. By the way, if you want to go on Patreon, like, all of that stuff is already up there. We watched Casey Anthony already, Laci Peterson's case, and then I believe we're going to do the Menendez brothers next, but that's over on Patreon. But the juror was just like, there's not a witch hunt, like, give it to me. And then there were parts of the case where he was not on board with the prosecution. He's like, what are you guys doing? And he was willing to just like, I don't know, like just automatically say that he was innocent, but he was just like, mistrial, like, you guys aren't prepared. I think that was when Detective Burkini kind of did not have a good testimony. Again, it's in the documentary. At the end of the day, though, there was a lot for the jury to go over. When you hear them talk about it, like, it was not an easy decision. Like, they poured over everything, and then looking at all of the statements, and again, it's just a compilation of putting everything together. They were like, the writing is on the wall. So Scott's been in jail all these years. Fast forward to 2020. The Supreme Court, they heard an argument to appeal his sentencing. And I believe like the initial push was like to have a new trial, saying that there were issues with some jurors being let go prior to deliberations. And then the defense was feeling like that wasn't appropriate. I feel like anything in that case, like it would always veer towards the defense, at least if there was a conviction. If somebody was released, and they can be like, an argument for it being like, well, we need a new trial now because they had sat in for everything, and they could have actually been the sway vote, and it is. It's like, you don't know. So after going through a bunch of like motions back and forth, I think this went on for like a year. On September 22nd, 2001, the California Supreme Court ruled that Scott wouldn't get a new sentence, but he would be resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So no longer on death row. And then at that point, he was actually moved from San Quentin to Mill Creek State Prison in California. In Ione, California. Then when we thought, okay, done, right? Like he went from death row to life in prison, which was very upsetting for a lot of people. On March 12th, 2024, he was granted a status hearing that was requested by the LA Innocence Project. So LA Innocence Project took on his case. I think there's a misconception that it was like the Innocence Project, known for taking on, cases that they absolutely believe that the person convicted is innocent. So I think when that name was like tied to it, everybody was like, well, what the heck have they found? Like, what do they have? But it's an LA Innocence Project. They accepted Scott's request to look at his case. And this hearing was to look at some new evidence, possibly to have like a retrial. And in April 23rd, 2024, the prosecution responded, and they were like, you're wanting to push for new DNA testing, which is unnecessary, because at the end of the day, like there's hardly, this wasn't a case that was built on DNA. Like he lied about so many circumstances around his DNA, and the testing was already done. It's been done several times. It was done in 2013 after the trial, and as well as 2019. Like we're just dredging up, like just admit it at this point, Scott. That's what's annoying. And like it's sad because I didn't know as many people like supported Scott as there are. Apparently, like mainly like women support him. I think right now, like, oh my God, his sister-in-law is just getting demolished on TikTok right now. Like, oh God, it's not funny, but like kind of, Janie, you're hurting people. Like it's not one of those cases where I feel like there are that many questions like of reasonable doubt. There's more questions to try to fit your theory than there is even like a sliver of like of his innocence. But like, yeah, TikTok, they're like, how to tell, you're in love with your brother-in-law without trying to tell us that you're in love with your brother-in-law. Like, she's just, I don't know. I don't want to go too hard because, again, sensitive subject, but TikTok's ruthless and Janie's getting it. So not only has she gone to law school to try to like, fight for him, but also runs like a bunch of blogs and websites and stuff like that focusing on his innocence. And again, like there's nothing been earth-shattering on there that I've been like, oh my God, let's stop and look at this a little bit more. Not at all. Same kind of thing as the investigator. I'm like, look at it. Especially with the map. I was like, what are you trying to do here? If anything, now I just actually see that they were a lot closer than in my mind I thought they were. Like Laci and Connor's remains. So that's what's going on there. Like I said, you guys can check it out. I'm not like going to be like, but I've told you that you don't have to go there. Like, no, I believe that like, do not ever just take my word or my opinions as is, it just doesn't make sense. And it kind of bothers me. Like they also, when they push for so many theories and point the finger at so many people, there have been points where they've pointed the finger at Laci's own family. They've been like, oh yeah, like Ron had a grudge against Scott. Like he felt like Scott made him feel like Scott was better than them. So it was like, oh, and he also went fishing that day. Like, you think that he wanted to frame Scott for making him feel like Scott was better than them and take his own stepdaughter who he adored, like, and loved? What? it just, and Amber, they've also turned to do on Amber. And also Amy, Laci's sister, being like, yeah, there was something going on because Amy was not going to be attending the dinner at Christmas Eve at Sharon's house, and neither was Brent. And then they also put in that Amber's only alibi that she was home that evening was her daughter, who was like 2. So again, implying Amber, when Amber didn't even know about her. But this is what I'm getting at. Like, this is what they're doing. They're everybody. So when you try to look at that, when you're like, okay, let's look at that for a second, you get slingshot back to where we were to begin with, and it was Scott. And then you try to go and try to run and look at this, and you get slingshot back because none of it makes sense. So it's very clear. I am of the mindset that Scott is guilty. Obviously, this is my opinion though. Like, so you guys are allowed to. You got check it out, do your own research, form your own opinions. He's also guilty in the court of law at the end of the day. So, and then it just sounds like, based on the motions from the LA Innocence Project, like there's not, like it's them wanting to like relook at things that have already been looked at numerous amount of time. There was nothing like new that they had. Like all of a sudden they've been like, this is the piece. Like this is finally it. Which is what I was expecting, because I was like, wow, that's like, when I thought it was the Innocence Project, I was like, they must have something huge. And then you find out and you're just like, oh, okay. So yeah, and like I said, I don't blame his family for being supportive. Like, especially when you hear that they held him on such a high pedestal and just like have never seen like a flaw in him. It would be unfathomable to try to wrap your head around the fact that like they're not Mr. Perfect, you know? But what upsets me is just like to blindly ignore, you know, alibis of the robbers. Like, you know, they basically are implying that the alibis of their family that had seen them, they're liars. And then when they are trying to say that they were framing them, and as soon as they found out about the Berkeley Marina, like then they put Laci's body there. Well, that couldn't have happened because they were already in jail. So it would have been somebody close to them, like a co-conspirator. So you're hurting so many people. And then at the end of the day, the people that you're hurting the most are Laci's loved one, to just try to re-narrate Scott's deplorable actions. And just seeing her family and loved ones, I don't know, you feel like you know them. They've been in the media for so long, and this case has, I think, touched so many of us that we've just like kind of automatically like had this like heart and love for them, people that we don't even know. And that's what I think a lot about in this, when the speculations keep getting dredged up and stuff like that. It's like, it's them who's constantly getting hurt because they're having to stand up for Laci and Connor and watch people defend somebody who did something just like so horrible. Laci's mom, Sharon, she wrote a book in 2006 called A Mother's Story of Love, Loss, and Justice. So I think it's like a biography memoir of Laci's life and death. All of the proceeds to that are used for Laci and Connor's Search and Rescue Fund, which Sharon founded. I have not read it yet. I probably will now. I feel like it's taken me so long to talk about this case because, well, first I always get in my head thinking like, oh, it's, you know, a lot of people have talked about it, but I know that you guys like hearing like different opinions and hearing it told from different people. And it's just been a case that I've always thought about, but it's hard. Like, it gets really emotional. I don't know why. I mean, I get emotional and attached to a lot of them, but it is that aspect that I was just saying, where you kind of like feel like you know them and there's so much to go over. You don't want to miss anything. Like, and it's just like so intricate. Like I've been wanting to work on it for so long. And finally, once not only the Netflix documentary came out, but when I saw that his family was also like, or not all of his family, his supporters were also doing one like, you know, face to face with Scott, I was like, okay, I want to talk now, because we're not going to have a lot of just like speculation over there with things that don't make sense. I want to go through it all. And like I said, like we've gone through a lot today. Thank you if you're still here. But there are so many places to go and find out like so many things that I just didn't even know were out there. And if you go to you know, one of the support website from his sister, like they've got the case files out there. So you can even just see it right from the supporters website. I just want to wrap up just extending like so much love and support, even like I'm sure they would never ever come, but like virtually, just like constantly always sending love and support to the Rocha family and just all of like Laci's family and friends, like who are obviously, you know, so lucky to love her. But not only that, Sharon mentions at the end of the Netflix documentary, and I thought was just like so touching and just I don't know, try to look for like the positive in things. There's a lot that's been done since, you know, Laci and Connor's death. There was a law that was passed, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, which is known as Laci and Connor's Law after their death. And even just like moving on, like legacy, like moving forward, not only is there that, there's also Sharon's foundation. And on top of that, what it sounds like Sharon just holds like so near and dear to her heart is the amount of women that have reached out to her to be like, I'm so sorry that Laci is gone, but like, I just want you to know that it's because of Laci's story that I'm here. Like, hearing Laci's story got them out of domestic violence situations. And she holds on to not wanting Laci to be remembered as a victim, but as a hero. Like, there have been positive and, I don't know, I guess like comforting stories to come out of this. And I would assume that would mean so much. It sounds like it. She says it means a lot to her. Okay, not gonna speak for her. Assume she says it in the documentary. Seriously, guys, watch the documentary. It was so beautifully done, I thought, and just to see her friends, like I said, and her family. Both of her fathers, Ron has since passed. He passed away in his sleep because his health was, I think, like due to failing health, and he's actually buried next to Laci and Connor. And then her father also passed away. So I just go send the family some love, you guys. And yeah, maybe even buy Sharon's book, even if you're not ready to read it yet. I think I'm gonna buy it right now, even though I don't know if I'm ready to read it yet. And at least, you know, you've already made your order and the proceeds are going to an amazing cause. So that is where I'm going to leave you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I know today was really, really long, but I feel like there's just like so much to go over. And there's still, I wasn't even able to get like through it all. So thank you for sticking around. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon. Bye.